Chapter 1026. When the first ray of sunlight shone into Jiang Hai's room, Jiang Hai yawned and slowly got up. He wiped off his saliva on Huali Shelley's two unspeakable places. He slowly leaped over her body and reached for the phone in the distance. He looked at the time and found that it was 7:45 in the morning, almost 8 o'clock. He slowly sat up, went to the bathroom to fill the water, and turned on the shower directly. He washed his hair and the sweat on his body, and brushed his teeth at the same time. After a while, Azalina and Huali Shelley came in, yawning. Azalina went to the bathroom first, while Huali Shelley smiled and went under Jiang Hai's shower, rubbing against Jiang Hai's body. Naturally, it was inevitable that some unspeakable places would rub against Jiang Hai's body. Well, it's early in the morning, and we still have things to do today. After brushing his teeth, Jiang Hai patted Huali Shelley's butt and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Huali Shelley couldn't help but chuckle. Huali, do you understand the situation of the other party today? Looking at Jiang Hai and Wallace Shelley's quarrel, Azalina stood up after taking a shower in the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror while preparing the makeup products she would use today. She asked in a low voice. Azalina didn't like makeup, but it wasn't good to always be barefaced. Besides, she had reached the age where she needed to take care of her skin. Although she was nourished by Jiang Hai and the aura in Jiang Hai's manner all day long, she learned a little from Qi Jia and the others. Now, although they didn't wear heavy makeup, at least they would use moisturizers, such as foundation, and other things were inevitable. We're almost done. The person we're going to meet this time is called Balian Madan. He's 41 years old and can be considered young and promising. He originally belonged to the Kanazavi Company in the European Red Wine Promotion Association. He worked there for 7 years, 3 of which he was the chief CEO. Later, because of some different decisions, he resigned and started his own red wine promotion company. He has some experience in the world, and his main business is in Europe and the Middle East. Hearing Azalina's words, Huali Shelley calmly reported the specific situation of the person they were going to meet today. Huali Shelley was really good at gathering information. When she was in the organization, she had been learning about this. However, the organization's authority and funding were not enough. In exchange for enough information, the spiders basically exchanged their bodies. Although Huali Shelley was good at flirting, she wasn't willing to exchange her body for information. This was why when Jiang Hai took her, she was still a virgin. In order to change her fate, she taught herself to hack when she was young. Some of the information she could find on the internet could be found. After coming to Jiang Hai was a shareholder of Google. Although the shares may not be too much, some of the authority and so on were very open. With Jiang Hai's presence, Huali Shelley could be said to be a tiger with wings. Right now, she may not be as good as the top hackers, but she was already quite good. If she entered that world, she would at least rank in the top 100. What's more, Jiang Hai had no intention of turning that world upside down. She was more concerned with defending and helping Jiang Hai find things. Some of the super encrypted information she couldn't find, like when Jiang Hai wanted to go to the base in Antarctica. She couldn't find any information, nor did she know the exact location. But some of the non-encrypted information wasn't difficult for her to find. Well, as long as I know this guy is reliable. Jiang Hai said with a smile, rubbing Huali Shelley's hair. After laughing and joking for a while, Jiang Hai came out at around 8 o'clock. He called the restaurant and ordered breakfast. Around 8:30, the two girls came out, dried their hair, and breakfast was ready. After eating a very good breakfast, Jiang Hai took a little rest and came to the conference room they booked at 9:30. At this time, Dulles Gerard and Knerson Peters had been waiting for a long time. Less than 10 minutes after they sat down, the person who had an appointment with Jiang Hai had also arrived. Hello, Mr. Balian Madan, let me introduce you. This is my boss, the owner of Tinglong Red Wine, Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang. Seeing the other party come in with a lawyer, plus a driver and bodyguard, Dulles Gerard stood up first, smiled at the other party, and then introduced Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai also reached out his hand. We finally meet. Looking at Jiang Hai's hand, the man also reached out his hand politely. While shaking hands with Jiang Hai, he also spoke Hua Xia in 4 syllables, and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Foreigners speak Hua Xia in 4 syllables when they first learn, which sounds very strange. Hello, Mr. Mudun, you should speak English. My English is fine. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai did not respond in Chinese, but spoke in English. It's not that Jiang Hai is pretentious, but because he speaks Chinese, Jiang Hai really can't understand. Instead of this, it's better to let him speak English. This is also giving him a way out. Wow, of course, that's good. Hearing that Jiang Hai has no problem speaking English, the man also said with a smile. After a few simple greetings, the 2 groups of people here also sat at the negotiating table. Foreigners don't like to talk about contracts very much. They prefer to be more direct, so after sitting down, they directly handed over a draft contract. To be honest, Mr. Jiang, I'm really interested in the red wine produced by your manor. Its taste can even be compared with the best wineries in Bordeaux, but to be honest, with your company's marketing and Walmart sales, it's difficult for your red wine to sell at a high price. If you agree to license all your wine to me, I can provide a price 15% higher than the market price of your red wine. Looking at Jiang Hai and the others looking at the contract, Balian Mudun also said with a smile. Mr. Mudun wants to buy all our red wine? I've never heard of this. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai glanced at Dulles Gerard beside him and saw him shaking his head slightly. He knew that this guy just added this clause. What's the difference? To be honest, the red wine consumed in Europe and the Middle East is in the millions of bottles every year. I checked the output of your manor, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000. Not to mention 150,000, even 500,000, what's the difference between this and selling it all to me? Balian Mudun said with a smile when he heard Jiang Hai's words. The difference is big. If I sell it all to you, then wouldn't I have to live under your nose? I'm not very interested in the cooperation you mentioned. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai shook his head. Indeed, according to what he said, there doesn't seem to be any difference, and he also bought all the wine in Jiang Hai's manor, so Jiang Hai has less to worry about. But don't forget that Jiang Hai's things are always in short supply. Red wine is only temporary, and it will be different in the future. Jiang Hai's goal is to sell a bottle for $2,000, and now if he cooperates with this person, then this person can sell it for $2,000 in the future. Jiang Hai doesn't know if this person can sell it for $2,000 in the future, but at least this price has nothing to do with Jiang Hai, and the most important thing is that after signing the contract, the wine will be his, and at most, it will be a loss if he sells it. If he is sent by another winery and suddenly tells Jiang Hai that they can't sell it, then it will be a loss. How can a person like Jiang Hai sign this kind of contract? He and Prawalton have never signed a contract. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person said with some surprise, wow, then what is Mr. Jiang interested in? I can give you 30% of my annual production, and the contract will be signed once a year. I promise that Walmart and I will not sell red wine to Europe, but the United States and other places have nothing to do with you. I have 2 cooperation models here. First, I will give you 10% of the total annual sales as commission, or 25% above the current market price. How much you sell and whether you can sell it or not is your business, but I only accept contracts that are signed once a year. Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table and said indifferently. When it came to business, the asking price was sky high and the asking price was on the spot. Of course, it couldn't be too outrageous. For example, if Jiang Hai directly said that he would sell it to you for $2,000 a bottle, and then how much you sell it for had nothing to do with him, the person in front of him would probably turn around and leave. With the current popularity of the red wine, 25% above the market price was also a little high. Just like what Dulles Gerard said, the standard was 20%. However, if he said 15%, then Jiang Hai would say 25%. Only then would there be room for negotiation. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Balian Mudun in front of him couldn't help but gently tap the table in front of him with his fingertips. He had to consider this contract carefully, and he also saw that Jiang Hai was still very tough. Just like what Jiang Hai thought, the most important thing in a business negotiation was the word negotiation. As for the specific results, a business of tens of millions or hundreds of millions, it was impossible to decide just based on his meeting with Jiang Hai. That would not be worth the loss. Chapter 1027. Boss, this guy is a bit powerful. Huali Shelley said with a smile as he followed Jiang Hai out of the conference room. He glanced at Balian Madan, who followed him out, and couldn't help but curl his lips. 2 hours passed quickly. During this time, Balian Madan kept talking while Jiang Hai just laughed. No matter what he said, Jiang Hai's attitude was always like this. He could sell the European distribution rights, but it was impossible to buy all of them. Moreover, the price was also somewhat fluctuating. One was persuading while the other was stubbornly insisting. Things had really reached a stalemate. Now it depended on who couldn't bear it anymore, or who was more important to this thing in his heart. Dulles Gerard, who also understood this, couldn't help but worry because he knew that Jiang Hai had a total of 3 legs: the ranch, the fishery, and the winery. He was different from men. A man's shortest leg was actually the most important. And among the 3 directions of Jiang Hai's manor, the winery was the shortest and perhaps the least important. After all, even if Dulles Gerard said it, he also knew that the winery couldn't make tens of billions of dollars a year. Hundreds of millions of dollars was the limit, so for Jiang Hai, it didn't matter if this thing made money or not. But Dulles Gerard was very concerned. Looking at Dulles Gerard beside him, Jiang Hai also chuckled. Don't worry. After all, this is a business worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I will be very concerned. Besides, didn't we already agree on the current situation? What's more, if this deal fails, we still have Walmart. It's just that we won't make as much money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Dulles Gerard couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He was a little too concerned. It was said that people strive for a breath, and Buddha strives for an incense stick. Compared to the fishery and the ranch, Dulles Gerard knew that he lost miserably. However, he still wanted to try harder. In the past, he had lost by 100 steps. Now, he had lost by 99 steps. In fact, it was just to comfort himself. After thinking it through, he couldn't help but shake his head. It was still Jiang Hai, who was rich and overbearing, who understood. This is my first time doing business. TSK, it feels quite interesting. Since he doesn't want to give in and still wants to get benefits, then let's wait for a few more days. When I'm not interested, we'll have a showdown. If it works, then it's fine. If it doesn't, then we'll leave. Seeing that Dulles Gerard understood, Jiang Hai smiled and took them directly to the hotel's Western restaurant. Jiang Hai was a good boss. Not only was he willing to pay at the end of the year, but he was also willing to spend on food and drinks outside. Basically, his employees would eat whatever he ate. The French restaurant of this hotel was quite famous in Europe. The taste was famous, and the price was also famous. Since Jiang Hai was here, he naturally wanted to give it a try. After arriving at the Western restaurant, there were no private rooms like in China. Instead, there were booths. Basically, they were for 2 people. At most, there would be a children's chair, and at most, it could seat 4 people. Jiang Hai and the others only opened 2 booths. They casually ordered and ate whatever they wanted. Jiang Hai was so indifferent. Knerson Peters had always been quite a glutton, and today's meal was the same. Not long after, the dishes were served. What was called steak? What was called red wine stewed beef? It was a mess. There was meat and seafood. Jiang Hai and the others, except for Dulles Gerard, did not pay attention to some dining etiquette. They ate directly there. Fortunately, it was a booth, and no one would pay attention to their situation. Otherwise, it would be inevitable that some pretentious people would come over to show off their superiority. But unfortunately, this kind of old-fashioned face-slapping did not appear in Jiang Hai's restaurant. Until he finished eating, no one came over to pretend. After Jiang Hai paid the bill, he was ready to go back to rest. In the afternoon, he still had to discuss business with Balian Mudan. Of course, he had to tell Pra Walton, Chi Li, and Jing Jin about this matter first. When it came to business, Jiang Hai was an out-and-out layman. He was more used to buying everything in one go. For example, how much his beef was sold for, how much his grass was sold for, and how much his fish was sold for. If you don't want to buy, then so be it. If you don't want to buy, then so be it. If you don't want to buy, then so be it. If you don't want to buy, then so be it. If you don't want to buy, then it's useless to make sarcastic remarks. But when discussing business with Balian Mudan, Jiang Hai also intended to hone himself. So for the first time, he was only tough, but not tough. After eating, Jiang Hai walked outside while thinking about who to call first. But when he walked to the door, he happened to see two people coming in. These two people were none other than Han Jiaran and her husband, whom Jiang Hai saw last night. When they saw Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran's eyes were filled with surprise, and her husband was pleasantly surprised. "Hello, my name is Yan Jingshuan. Thank you for your care last night. Otherwise, we might have to go somewhere else for the night." Seeing Jiang Hai, Yan Jingshuan was very excited and quickly said to Jiang Hai, Oh, it's okay. It's just a small matter. You can do whatever you want. I still have things to do." Looking at these two people, Jiang Hai also chuckled and then gave up his position. After the two people passed, he also led everyone to the elevator. "Jingshuan, I forgot to take my sunglasses. I have to go back and get them." Just as Jiang Hai and the others walked over, Han Jiaran seemed to have gathered her courage. She suddenly stopped and said to Yan Jingshuan anxiously, "No, this is France. Do you need to wear sunglasses to eat?" Hearing Han Jiaran's words, Yan Jingshuan couldn't help but laugh at himself. When did their reputation spread to France? I'm afraid that some paparazzi may find us. You don't want our anniversary trip to be disturbed. Hearing his words, Han Jiaran also chuckled and said to him, "Well, I'll go with you." Hearing his wife say so, Yan Jingshuan couldn't say anything more, so he was ready to go back with her, but when Han Jiaran heard this, she immediately shook her head. No, the dishes here are so slow. I'll take the elevator and come back soon. Remember to order seafood baked rice for me." After saying that, Han Jiaran quickly left here. Yan Jingshuan looked at her and couldn't help but smile. Then he went to a seat and began to order. Han Jiaran ran and finally stopped the elevator door when Jiang Hai's elevator door was about to close. "Ha, you, I want to talk to you." Pointing to Jiang Hai in the elevator, Han Jiaran said with a serious face. "Huh? What do you want to talk about?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some doubts. What does he want to talk about with her? She, come out. Looking at Jiang Hai's face, "I'm not familiar with you," Han Jiaran was a little annoyed. She grabbed Jiang Hai's clothes and pulled him out. As soon as she started, Azalina and Wallace Shelley also wanted to move, but they were stopped by Jiang Hai. In this way, the elevator door closed again, and she took Jiang Hai to the next elevator. After pressing her floor, Han Jiaran looked at Jiang Hai seriously. "Why are you here?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran said with a serious face. "Don't worry, I didn't know you were coming. I'm here to talk about business." Looking at her, Jiang Hai smiled and tidied up the creases on his suit. This woman really knew how to flatter herself. "Business? Beef?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts. "It's the red wine business. My business is very big." Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai said with a smile. "How big?" Hearing Jiang Hai say it was very big, Han Jiaran couldn't help but look at him with some doubts. "Over 100 million. After thinking about it for a moment, Jiang Hai calmly said, "How much money would he make if the deal is successful?" "Korean won?" Cut the crap. This is Europe. Your Korean won can't be spent here. Dollar, if you have something to say, just say it. Did you drag me here just to ask me this? Seeing Han Jaron keep asking questions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes at her. Did this woman have anything to do? Why did she drag him here for no reason? $100 million? That's 120 billion Korean won. I just wanted to ask why you are here. Since you also have something to do here, let's pretend we don't know each other. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jaron muttered in a low voice. Sure enough, they weren't in the same world. 120 billion Korean won, just thinking about it made her scalp tingle. That won't do. You dragged me away, and now you want to leave? I can keep the secret, but you have to give me something in return. Looking at Han Jaron, Jiang Hai smiled, then lowered his head and looked at her. What are you doing? Looking at Jiang Hai's face that was getting closer and closer, Han Jaron was somewhat stunned. At this time, Jiang Hai's mouth kissed her lips. After a round of activity, the elevator arrived at the floor that Han Jaron pressed the button. When the elevator door opened, Jiang Hai gently put her down outside the elevator door, then waved his hand and pressed the button for his floor. Jiang Hai originally didn't want anything to happen with this Korean, but since she came to his door, he couldn't avoid flirting with her. After all, Jiang Hai was the kind of person who would kick a dog when it crossed the line. Watching the elevator door close, Han Jaron took a while to recover. This was the first time she had met someone like Jiang Hai. Chapter 1028. What took you so long? Have you brought the food over? The dishes have been served. When she returned to the dining room, Han Jaron was still in a daze. When she heard Yan Jingxuan's words from afar, she chuckled and walked over. At the same time, she showed off her sunglasses. Yan Jingxuan smiled when he saw that his wife had returned with her sunglasses. Then, he began to eat. Han Jaron bit her lip gently as she looked at her husband in front of her. To be honest, she was very conflicted. She knew that Jiang Hai didn't like her. He even had a prejudice against South Korea, but she didn't know why. Sometimes, she would think of that guy. Han Jaron sat on the chair and looked at Yan Jingxuan in front of her. She didn't know what to do. She knew what was going on with this trip, but she couldn't explain it clearly. This made her feel a little shameless. Speaking of Han Jaron and Yan Jingxuan's marriage, from the very beginning, the woman was stronger than the man. When Han Jaron was at her peak, she married Yan Jingxuan. Then, she retired from acting and stayed at home wholeheartedly. When the woman was stronger than the man might be grateful at first. But gradually, this feeling would turn into pressure. Just like Jiang Hai. He and Qili were the same at the beginning. When Qili and her mother arrived and said that they had chosen Jiang Hai to marry and could even lend him 400,000 yuan for free, Jiang Hai's first thought was that he had stumbled and picked up a gold bar when he needed money the most. But after a year, he was treated like heir. Everyone around him was pointing at him and hearing rumors every day. Qili was a used shoe that had been played by her ex-boyfriend. Qili ignored Jiang Hai because she was unrestrained in the company. Qili had a new home in the capital and so on. All these pressures weighed on the man's shoulders. In addition, when Jiang Hai called, Jing Jin had ridiculed him. It wasn't that Jiang Hai wasn't human. Even if he knew it was fake at the beginning, he would still have doubts if it was said too much. Since he had doubts, he couldn't directly point at Jiang Hai's nose and ask if he had an affair. Because in Jiang Hai's eyes, he was just a spare tire. When all these things were mixed together, Jiang Hai's choice was to leave. Just like the message he received, Qili didn't like him, so he should leave. Whether it was for his own future or for Qili's life, it was good for both sides. This was Jiang Hai's choice at the beginning. You couldn't say that he was wrong because he didn't participate in Qili's life at all. Of course, what happened later was another story. The way Yan Jingxuan released this pressure was to find information about himself with other women. However, he was still a good person, because at least he knew that after going out to play, he had to go home. As for Han Jiaren, it was just an accident that she was with Jiang Hai at the beginning. Later, he came to her and she agreed. First, it was because he threatened her, and second, it was because she wanted to take revenge on Yan Jingshuan. However, after taking revenge, she felt a little regretful and afraid. In her heart, she and Yan Jingshuan were even. She even owed him a little, so she stopped making trouble. However, sometimes men were such strange creatures. When his wife kept making trouble and crying, his first reaction was annoyance. Yes, he felt very annoyed and was even more unwilling to go home. However, suddenly one day, his wife stopped making trouble. Every day, she just sat there in a daze. When he wanted to eat, she would cook. When he wanted to put on his clothes, she would tidy up his clothes. There was no smile on her face, no other expression, and she didn't even talk to him. Then this man panicked. He would be afraid. He would think that his wife was completely tired of him, and whether his wife was going to divorce him. Just like when Jiang Hai said that he had wronged Jiang Hai in Chile, Jiang Hai was also stunned. The words that he had prepared were useless at that time. It was the same for Yan Jingshuan. When Han Jiaren fell silent, he was also a little afraid. To put it bluntly, although he was under a lot of pressure, he still liked his wife very much. Therefore, after some research, he found a time this year and prepared to go on a trip with Han Jiaren. Han Jiaren was also mentally prepared to leave everything behind and live a good life with Yan Jingshuan. However, she met Jiang Hai. She was an actress. She didn't believe in fate, but she knew that Jiang Hai was indeed her demon. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't care about how Han Jiaren and Yan Jingshuan were doing. He was also too lazy to care. After going back to rest for a while, the negotiations in the afternoon continued. It was still similar to the morning. The other party had been grinding, and Jiang Hai had been clinging to his principles. But then again, there was some progress. For example, this Balian Mudan was no longer clinging to everything, but he asked for a share of 50%. He also wanted the distribution rights in Europe and the Middle East. The price had been raised to 18%. And Jiang Hai still only gave the European distribution rights. What a joke. He had such a strong relationship with Du Feiman in Dubai. Why would he need a distributor? And Jiang Hai's price had only been reduced to 22%. It seemed that a 20% price increase should be stable. The most important thing now was the difference in supply and location. They would slowly grind it out. Although the negotiations didn't end at 4:00 in the evening, they had made a lot of progress. Mr. Jiang, you came to France. It was really late last night. You also need to rest. Today, no matter what, you have to give me a chance to be the host. Seeing that the meeting was over, Jiang Hai was about to leave, but Balian Mudan stopped Jiang Hai first and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him curiously. I've already booked a place for dinner at the Pierre Gagnaire. You know, I've been waiting for your arrival for a long time. After dinner, I've also arranged a place to have fun. Looking at Jiang Hai's curious eyes, Balian Mudan also said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also glanced at Wallace Shelley and Azalina behind him. After these two nodded, Jiang Hai also nodded, indicating that he could give it a try. Seeing that Jiang Hai was willing to go, Balian Mudan couldn't help but laugh. In fact, foreigners, including French, really didn't like to invite others to dinner. But he had investigated Jiang Hai and knew that Huaxia people liked to invite others to dinner very much. Many business deals were negotiated at the dinner table. Although he didn't want to discuss business at the dinner table, it was inevitable to be the host. Maybe if Jiang Hai was in a good mood, his business could be negotiated well. After Jiang Hai agreed, he went downstairs to pick up the car, and Jiang Hai naturally had the hotel's car to pick him up. Azalina acted as the driver, Knerson Peters sat in the passenger seat, and Jiang Hai and Wallace Shelley sat in the back. On the way, Wallace Shelley checked the situation of the restaurant called Pierre Gagnaire. Pierre Gagnaire was the name of a chef and also the name of a restaurant. It was located on the ground floor of the five-star Hotel Balzac on the Champs-Élysées. The space wasn't big, and the decoration was ordinary, but it was really not an easy thing to eat here because this restaurant was a 3-star Michelin restaurant. You couldn't order food here. There were only 2 set meals, €155 for lunch and €310 for dinner. Of course, if you wanted to eat 2 sets, you could pay more, but it also depended on whether the other party prepared extra ingredients, otherwise you wouldn't be able to eat. Yes, the restaurant here was so amazing. It was up to you whether you wanted to eat or not. Most importantly, according to the information that Wallace Shelley had found out, if an average person wanted to eat here, even if they were very rich, they would have to make an appointment. A 3-star Michelin restaurant might not even be able to be booked in 2 or 3 months. The reason why Balian Madan was able to make an appointment was mainly because he had a supply agreement with this restaurant. He was responsible for the red wine of this restaurant. At the same time, it was also quite troublesome to eat in this restaurant. First of all, you had to dress well, which meant you had to wear a jacket, vest, sweater, and so on. Fortunately, when Zhang Hai came, he wanted to negotiate, so he brought his only suit. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to wear anything to eat. Secondly, to eat in such a restaurant, you couldn't be late. If you were late by 20 minutes, the restaurant would default to your cancellation. Even if you called and said you would be there immediately and there was a traffic jam here, it would be useless. Once you arrived in 20 minutes, the next person would be there. If you rushed over in 21 minutes, it would depend on the other party's intentions. If you arrived in 30 minutes, then sorry, see you in 3 months. Secondly, the tips here were also relatively high. The lowest was 12.5%. That meant that if you were not satisfied, you would have to tip 12.5% for €100. If you were satisfied, it would be 15%. Of course, if you really wanted to tip more, probably no one would care. Zhang Hai and the others were going to the Pierre Gagnaire restaurant today. It was a gourmet of the last century. It was the founder of the molecular gastronomy movement in the 1990s. The so-called molecular gastronomy had been around for thousands of years in China. It was tofu. However, the molecular gastronomy now was not limited to tofu. It could also be made into other things, such as lobster meat. For example, making lobster meat into ham, making ham into bacon, and making bacon into lobster. That was how Zhang Hai understood it. Chapter 1029. Of course, what he thought above was just Zhang Hai's idea. In fact, molecular cuisine was not so simple. To be precise, molecular cuisine referred to combining 2 completely unrelated things into a new thing. It had to have the characteristics of both, but not both. For example, soybeans and brine would become tofu when put together. This was a delicacy that changed the molecular structure, not the direct breaking of things that everyone was familiar with. After arriving at this restaurant, Zhang Hai and the others were also divided into many tables and sat down. Then, it was time for the dishes to be served. Because this restaurant only provided meal A or meal B, it did not provide activities for guests to choose their meal. There was no other way. A 3-star Michelin restaurant was so amazing. It was like Zhang Hai selling things. It was up to you whether you wanted to buy or not. Here, it was up to you whether you wanted to eat or not. But even so, the people who came to eat here were still in short supply. Ordinary tourist groups did not have such treatment. In fact, the set meal wasn't too complicated. There were only 6 dishes in total. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sold for only €310. Well, €310 wasn't too complicated. Regarding this, Zhang Hai could only chuckle. The dishes were divided into the appetizer, sweet soup, seafood, main dish, sauerkraut, and dessert. There were only 6 dishes in total. It was different from the 3 to 5 dishes of ordinary French dishes. There was an extra sauerkraut here. The so-called sauerkraut was something like ice cream. Its main function was to clean the mouth and let the taste buds rest. Zhang Hai did not understand this at all. However, the taste of this thing was not bad. After eating this meal in a French 3-star Michelin restaurant, Jiang Hai smacked his lips. To be honest, the food here was quite good. Whether it was the craftsmanship or the raw materials, they were all delicious. However, there was too little. Other than saying that he was half full, he really had no other way to describe it. It was not enough. However, because this was paid for by Balian Madan, Jiang Hai could not say anything. He had already decided to eat the small hot pot after going back at night. Otherwise, he would starve to death tomorrow morning. "Hi, Bath, how are the dishes today?" When Jiang Hai was thinking about how many servings of meat to order for the cheese hot pot, an old man walked out from the back with a smile. He was wearing a white chef's robe without any grease on it. He didn't wear a hat on his head. His hair was almost bald, and it grew messily on his head. "Delicious, my dear Pierre." Looking at the old man, Balian Madan also raised his thumb and said with a smile, "It's good that you are satisfied. You should know that the ingredients here are quite hard to come by. I spent a lot of money to snatch these beef and seafood from Sam's Club in Walmart. They belong to the Soaring Dragon Manor." When he heard Balian Madan's words, the old man also said proudly, but as soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Hai almost choked on his words. "Cough, cough, it's okay, it's okay." Seeing the two people in front of him looking at him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say awkwardly, Pierre, let me introduce you. This is the owner of the Soaring Dragon Manor you mentioned, Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang, Mr. Jiang, this is Pierre Gagny, the owner and executive chef of this restaurant." Looking at Jiang Hai's awkward appearance, Balian Madan also explained with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded calmly. The old man was surprised and rushed to Jiang Hai's side in a big stride. Jiang Hai nodded calmly when he heard Jiang Hai's words. The old man was surprised and rushed to Jiang Hai's side. "Oh my God, you are the owner of the Soaring Dragon Manor. I really don't know how you raise the beef and fish. Those things are no longer ingredients, but works of art. Do you understand?" Holding Jiang Hai's hand, the old man Pierre Gagny said with excitement. "Cough, it's okay, it's okay." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. In China, no matter how good a chef is, you are just a chef who serves others. Even if you earn tens of millions a year, in front of some entrepreneurs and big bosses, your status is still a little low, but in France, it's different. In France, good chefs are artists. The food they make can even be exhibited in art museums. French chefs have a very high status in society, just like this restaurant. Even if they are partners, Balian Madan still has to make an appointment and line up. As for other people, even if they are the richest man in a certain region, the mayor of Paris, or the prime minister of France, they also have to make an appointment and line up. If Pierre Gagny says he won't serve you, he won't serve you. If you don't want to eat, then get out. No matter how much money you have or how much power you have, if he doesn't serve you, he won't serve you. This is what an artist is, and if there is no such person, then he is a chef. I have never seen beef as good as the beef of the Soaring Dragon Manor. That texture, and that seafood. To be honest, Jiang, are you interested in holding an ingredient exhibition? You don't know that there is only a small supply of your ingredients in France every week, a few hundred kilograms of beef and 1,000 or 2,000 kilograms of fish. Every time this time, all the purchasers of Michelin restaurants in France will rush to the nearest Walmart as if they are going to war. But even so, they often can't get it. This week, my luck is good. My 3 purchasers brought me a total of 80 kilograms of beef and 210 kilograms of fish, but only red fish and grouper. Bro, your anchovy and Atlantic salmon are really too hard to get. It's said that you also have giant lobsters, king crabs, and spotted shrimps? Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man Gagny kept talking. Oh. Are these things not for sale in France? I really don't know. My beef and seafood are cold. Generally speaking, they are only supplied to the United States. The European side is handled by the Walmart company. I don't know much about it. Hearing the old man's words, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Hey, you really don't know. If you have time, go to any Walmart in France next Wednesday and take a look. You will understand what is crazy. Your ingredients are great. If you can you let me visit your place? I'm really curious about what kind of soil and water can raise such good ingredients. Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't know much about it, Pierre Gagny also sighed and said. Of course, my address is Winthrop Town, Boston. After you go there and ask about the Soaring Dragon Manor, almost everyone knows about it. I'm waiting for your visit. Jiang Hai will not refuse such a request. He can just let Chia learn a thing or two from the old man. By then, he will have a good meal, right? This is really great, Jiang, this is my business card. If you want to eat my dishes, you can come at any time. You are my friend. Patting Jiang Hai on the shoulder, the old man Gagny excitedly left his phone number. After Jiang Hai called, the two exchanged phone numbers and he left. Wow, to be honest, I really envy you, Jiang. Do you know how many years I have supplied him with red wine before I got the right to cut the line? Even so, I still have to make an appointment with a week's time. You can come and eat at any time. TSK, I am more and more confident in your red wine. After watching Jiang Hai and Pierre Gagny exchange phone numbers, Balian Mudun couldn't help but smack his lips. He was really envious and jealous. In this regard, Jiang Hai just smiled and put away his phone. After befriending a Michelin 3-star chef, Jiang Hai's mood became better. After chatting for a while, Balian Mudun told Jiang Hai that they could go to the next program. Although he was not full, Jiang Hai still left. The other party was treating him, and he didn't want to eat so much. After dinner, a half-full dinner, Jiang Hai and his group arrived at the other place that Balian Mudun said they could play at night. Of course, because of the relationship between the two women, he didn't go to those smoky nightclubs that only received men. He also heard that Jiang Hai didn't like noisy environments, so he didn't go to those noisy bars. Instead, he went to a bar that occupied a very large area but didn't look luxurious. This bar was called Fighters. Jiang Hai was no stranger to this word. Fighters meant fighters. It was like the game that Jiang Hai had been playing before, King of Fighters, KOF. The F was the abbreviation of this English word, King of Fighters. This was the King of Fighters. As soon as he saw this word, Jiang Hai guessed what this place did. Sure enough, as soon as he entered, Jiang Hai saw a lot of people surrounding a huge octagonal iron cage. They were constantly shouting, and in the iron cage, two people were fighting hard. Jiang Hai and Knerson Peters were very familiar with such a scene. However, what Knerson Peters wasn't familiar with was what the guy in the striped shirt was doing there. One had to know that there were no referees when he fought. It was much wilder than this match. Unless one side admitted defeat or lost consciousness, the battle would never stop. That was black boxing, and this was just a performance at best. But even so, the battle on the field made the blood of the people below the field spurt out, and the secretion of hormones accelerated. Perhaps deep in the hearts of men, there were some who advocated violence. Watching such a battle, they really liked it. Chapter 1030. Balian Mudun was not like these ordinary spectators. He was also a well-known figure in France. Although he might not have much money, that was according to Jiang Hai's standards. After all, there were not many people in the world who were richer than him. With Jiang Hai and the others, Balian Mudun took them directly to the private room on the second floor. This bar was quite well done. The private room on the second floor was actually like a hotel. There was a living room, a room, and a bathroom inside. Except for the lack of a kitchen, one could live here. The place to watch the game was on the balcony. There were sofas, massage chairs, and even hanging baskets for the children and women. It was quite comfortable. After Jiang Hai and the others walked in, a waiter led them over and handed them an iPad at the same time. On it, there was information about tonight's match. After Jiang Hai and the others finished ordering drinks, they sat calmly on the balcony and watched the game on the field condescendingly. Recently, the UFC in Europe has been quite popular. The fighting mode of the UFC continues here. Other than not allowing head-butting, grabbing hair, gouging eyes, spitting on the opponent, grabbing hair, putting hands and feet into the opponent's mouth, kicking the crotch, digging the orifice, and controlling the small joints, for example, only grabbing the opponent's finger, attacking the spine or the back of the head, attacking the opponent's kidney with the heel, grabbing the ribs, pinching the opponent, kicking the opponent's head to the ground, knee strikes aimed at the head, stomping the opponent to the ground, taking off the opponent's pants, attacking the opponent during the break, or sticking the opponent's neck to the ground. There are almost no restrictions. Continuous knee strikes, head kicks, lateral elbows, and so on are all allowed here. Balian Madan also explained with a smile when he saw Jiang Hai watching the game below. Boxing had always been a very profitable profession. At present, the world's top-earning sport was still boxing. Boxing might only fight 1 or 2 fights a year, but the broadcasting fee for these 1 or 2 fights was quite terrifying. Although UFC and WWE had been very popular in recent years and had taken away a lot of traffic, Pretty Boy, Pacquiao, and the others could still earn tens of millions of dollars if they fought once a year. This was far from what NBA players or soccer players could compare to. Although they could also earn that much in a year, they were so tired that they almost didn't have much time to rest. On the other hand, boxing players had a lot more time. Jiang Hai only knew about this after he arrived in America. There was no other way. There weren't many people in China who would pay attention to these things. In fact, a long time ago, several big boxing associations in the world had paid attention to this so-called fighting club in Huaxia. However, because of the policy at that time, basically no situation could enter. If it wasn't for the fact that boxing was an Olympic sport, the court probably wouldn't even broadcast it. Huaxia's Kung Fu was also quite famous internationally. Huaxia's Kung Fu was one of the 3 major boxing skills in the world. It was Muay Thai, Israeli Mega, and Huaxia's Kung Fu. Nowadays, it was better to call it Sanda. However, since the Manchurian Qing entered the pass, in order to castrate the Han people's blood, they also dealt the strongest blow to the martial artists among the people. After this foundation was laid, the previous dynasty was always in turmoil. There was also a shortage of martial artists among the people. When the new Huaxia was established, the existence of martial artists who broke the law reached its peak. In some times, these martial artists were even specifically arrested. Martial arts was directly castrated and became just one of the performances. So many years had passed. Although the country had the intention to pick up martial arts, actual combat was not something that could be picked up so easily. In the few major international fighting leagues, there were Chinese players, but they were basically not too strong. Moreover, they were all in the light heavyweight class, flyweight class, or featherweight class. There wasn't even a middleweight class. If one day, Huaxia had a super heavyweight boxing champion or a UFC champion, the domestic boxing situation might change a lot. But for now, it was just that. This was an unpopular profession. However, in Europe, this profession was gradually reviving. Although the UFC was not as popular as boxing, it was not as popular as boxing. But just in Europe and the United States, its standard and personnel's income had been greatly increased. The top fighters in the UFC earned tens of millions of dollars just by fighting 2 matches a year. This did not include endorsements. Of course, the fighters didn't have any endorsements. Firstly, it was because they looked too fierce. Secondly, when they fought, there were requirements for their underwear, shoes, gloves, and so on. Moreover, they didn't appear on camera very often. They really didn't have any endorsements. Unlike basketball and football stars, NBA players had to fight 82 games in a year. As long as they wore the same pair of shoes, as long as they were diligent, they would appear on camera 82 times. At the very least, they would be broadcasted all over the state. Naturally, it was easier to find endorsements. On the other hand, the fighters basically endorsed some cars. However, because they were too big, they couldn't endorse small cars. It was very awkward. Therefore, the fighters' main income was from the live broadcasts. If there were endorsements, there would be endorsements. If there weren't, then forget it. Jiang Hai used to be interested in boxing. He had even specially learned it. Now that he was watching them fight, he was very interested. The two people fighting in the arena were naturally not fighters in the UFC, nor were they famous fighters. They could only be considered average professional fighters or amateurs. They fought here for an appearance fee. Firstly, it was to stimulate the bar's spending. Secondly, it was to allow the audience to place bets. In Europe and the United States, there were many such bars. Of course, some underground boxing bars might be fake. They might even kill people. It was much more exciting. However, the police were also very strict. With such a large territory, it was naturally impossible for it to be an underground boxing bar. Compared to the place where Knerson Peters used to live, this place was simply heaven. The two people in the arena had already fought 2 rounds. One of them was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu player, and the other was a boxer. According to Jiang Hai's opinion, they were not fighting each other. The jiu-jitsu player always wanted to take the other person down. He used his ground techniques. The boxer used his secondary punches to maintain a distance and not let the other person pounce on him. If the other person wanted to pounce on him, a combination of punches would be enough to win him. The fighting techniques of different countries in the world were different. Naturally, their advantages were also different. For example, those who practiced boxing had great strength in their fists, good footwork in their lower body, strong resistance to attacks, and similarly strong endurance. However, the weakest point was the opponent's ground fighting ability. The defense of the lower body was very weak. After falling to the ground, the defense of the joints was weak, and the strength of the counterattack was insufficient. Muay Thai's long-distance leg attacks were strong and fast. They were invincible in close-range elbow and knee attacks. They did not have many advantages in ground fighting, but it could be said that they were not at a disadvantage. The disadvantage was that their mid-range attacks were weak. When their legs and elbows could not hit their opponents, their fists would be somewhat weak. This was the opposite of boxing. Because Muay Thai mainly trained the bones, there were very few heavyweight fighters. Therefore, their defense was not strong. It was common to see Muay Thai fighters fight with other types of boxing. They fought beautifully, but they were finished after 2 or 3 heavy blows. Mega Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu were mainly specialized in ground fighting, uniform techniques, and joint techniques. They could not compete with Muay Thai in a head-on fight, and they could not compete with boxing in a head-on fight. However, as long as the opponent was down, the Mega Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had a high chance of winning. Therefore, it was common to see UFC matches. After a few exchanges, the opponent would take the initiative to lie down. He was not in a hurry to stand up. Instead, he used his 2 legs to block the opponent. Under the situation where the opponent was not allowed to directly step on the opponent and kick the opponent's head while lying down, the opponent could only lower his body to fight. This fight would cause the opponent to lose his balance. At that time, it would depend on the situation. As long as the opponent was caught, there was a high chance that the fight would be over. Of course, if you pounced on the opponent and were hit by the opponent's boxing combo, or were swept in the head or hit in the cheek by a Muay Thai fighter, then the fight would probably be over. At this time, the two people in the arena were like this. The two people's skills were about the same. He was afraid of the opponent's ground attack, and the opponent was afraid of the opponent's fast punches. Therefore, for a while, the two of them were in a stalemate. From time to time, they would test each other. It was quite lively. "Yo, isn't this Madan? Why do you have time to come here today? Didn't you go to discuss business?" Just as everyone was watching happily here, a joking voice suddenly came from afar. Jiang Hai looked up and saw a bronze-skinned man wearing a white cloak made of feathers. He was hugging 2 foreign girls on both sides and looked here proudly. The lighting here was actually not very good. It was a bit dark, but even so, he was still wearing a big pair of sunglasses. He was not blind, but he was pretending. And from his words, the latter was more likely. This person should not be from South America or Southeast Asia. He seemed to be the descendant of a black man and a white man. The two girls next to him were similar. They were not too black, but they were not white either. They could be considered mixed race. "Oh, it's you. What's the matter? If there's nothing, then get lost. I have to accompany a client today." Hearing this person's words, Balian Mudan was not someone to be trifled with. He gently shook the red wine in his goblet and said indifferently. Hearing that this guy dared to talk to him like this, the face of the mixed race here changed, and several of his men behind him also stood up, but he waved his hand at this time, stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony, looking at Jiang Hai and the others. Chapter 1031. Oh, so tough. Looking at Balian Mudan, the mixed blood walked over with a look of disdain. He took off his sunglasses, and a pair of humorous triangular eyes appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at the triangular eyes, Jiang Hai couldn't find any other adjectives other than, where did he get the confidence to take off his sunglasses? "Oh, so what if I'm tough? Do you still want another round? Is it you, or is it your junk?" Balian Mudan glanced at the man with disdain and said with a look of disdain. He didn't see that this Balian Mudan was not a good person either. "Hey, let's have another round. Wait until the end of today." After nodding at Balian Mudan with his finger, the man walked back with a smile and went back to watching the game. Jiang Hai frowned. He wasn't here to stand up for others or to fight. Although he wasn't afraid of anyone, he didn't need to be someone else's gun. If this Balian Mudan was such a person, let alone 20%, even if it was 25%, he wouldn't let him represent him. This was because this guy would cause trouble for him. "Mr. Jiang, don't worry, this guy is called Terrell King. He is the son of a director of the red wine distribution company I used to work for. This is Paris, he won't dare to mess around. Besides, I'm quite confident in my bodyguard." Balian Mudan saw Jiang Hai frown and couldn't help but explain with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's frown loosened a little. As long as it had nothing to do with him, he didn't mind watching a good show. After hearing his words, Azalina and the others also noticed Balian Mudan's chauffeur and bodyguard. Wallace Shelley thought for a moment, put on her glasses, and quietly scanned the person. Then, she used the microcomputer in her makeup box to check the person's situation while pretending to touch up her makeup. In less than 3 minutes, she had already investigated the situation of this person, and then Azalina whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Balian Mudan's bodyguard was called John Vic. He was originally a member of the French Foreign Corps. He left the team at the age of 25 and fought in the underground world of Europe. He even worked as an assassin, but his rate of accepting missions was very low. He had some reputation in the underground boxing world, but in the Secret Service world, he. According to Azalina, if they fought in the ring, she might not be his opponent. But if they fought now, she could kill him 100 times before he could react. There was no need to worry about such a person. He could be a bodyguard, but he could not threaten Jiang Hai. Moreover, if they fought in the ring, Knerson Peters was not afraid of anyone. After confirming that there was no problem with his safety, Jiang Hai continued to watch the game with Balian Mudan. Of course, they could also bet. European bookmakers dared to bet almost all kinds of bets. Not only in sports, but also in which city hosted the Olympic Games, the World Cup, and so on. They also dared to bet on which country's regime changed. Of course, they only bet on some countries in the United States and Europe. Domestically, Jiang Hai did not know anything. For a competition like this, there would naturally be people who would place bets. However, the bets here were more for fun than to become rich. Therefore, the highest amount of bets that could be placed was only 500 euros. The odds were from 1 to 3. That was to say, no matter how much they lost, they would only lose 500 euros. After deducting the principal, they would only lose 1,500 euros. They could afford to lose 3 purple tickets, not to mention that there was no chance of getting 3 times the odds. Basically, the odds were between 0.7 to 1. 2. People who gambled were always the most profitable. They would not lose money. After 3 or 4 rounds, a waiter knocked on the door. After getting permission to enter, he came in and asked Jiang Hai if he wanted to personally participate in a round. Here, he had to sign up the name list. Balian Mudun naturally didn't care about this and directly asked his bodyguard and driver to sign up. But just as he took the iPad from the other party's hand and saw the other party's information, the bodyguard's face changed instantly. What's wrong? Balian Mudun was a master of reading people's faces. When he saw his bodyguard, he couldn't help but ask. This person. I can't beat him. Hearing his employer's words, the man named John Vick said helplessly. You haven't even fought yet, and you already know that you can't beat him? Hearing his words, Balian Mudun's face sank, then he walked over quickly and looked at the person who had already signed up. He couldn't help but frown when he saw this person. This was because this person was not Terrell King's subordinate that he was familiar with. Instead, he was a South Korean called Park Tae-min. He was 187 meters tall, 190 pounds, and 31 years old this year. He had no impression of this person. What was going on? This man is the master of my underground boxing, and it is because of him that I ended my underground boxing career. So I'm sorry, Mr. Mudun, my duty is to protect your arrangements, not to fight with an enemy that I can't defeat. If you are dissatisfied with me, you can dismiss me at any time. Looking at Balian Mudun's face, John Vick also said helplessly on the other side. Balian Mudun seems to be a very good employer to him. Although he is not particularly generous, the money he should give will not be small. He has also played many games for Balian here. After every game, all the bonuses and money earned will be his, and he will even give him a sum of money alone. So when John Vick heard that he was going to fight, he did not have any dissatisfaction. Instead, he was a little eager to give it a try, but now it seems that the other party has studied his situation. I'm sorry, Mr. Jiang, I've embarrassed myself in front of you. I'm going to deal with this matter now. Hearing that John Vick would rather be dismissed than fight, Balian Mudun knew that he had made up his mind. But even if he wants to be dismissed, he has to go back and talk about it. But now, he has to go to Terrell Mudun. Tonight's game is going to be cancelled. Although he will be laughed at, Jiang Hai's hundreds of millions of dollars business must not be delayed. He could see from Jiang Hai's eyes just now that Jiang Hai hates being implicated, and hates being made a fool of by others. Originally, he just wanted to show off his skills, but now he has to settle this matter so that Jiang Hai can rest assured. Wait a minute, the South Pole. But just as he was about to go out, Jiang Hai stood up and waved his hand gently. Then he walked to the information and looked at the person's situation. Originally, Jiang Hai was just like what he thought. He didn't want to cause trouble, but after learning that the other party was from the South Pole, he became interested. It must be known that the Huaxia people hated the Japanese the most, followed by the South Pole. If the other party also found a Frenchman, or an Englishman, or even an American, German, Soviet Russian, Indian, etc., to show off, then Jiang Hai would just let him deal with it. But the South Pole, it should be quite fun to fight with them. Of course, it's not that he wants to fight by himself. Even if he wants to do so, Azalina and the others will definitely not allow Jiang Hai to do so, because even if there is only a 0.0001% chance that the other party will hurt Jiang Hai, they will not allow it. But just now, Jiang Hai saw that Knerson Peters was eager to have a try, so it doesn't matter if he let him play. Knerson Peters, are you interested in going down to play? Looking at Knerson Peters, Jiang Hai asked indifferently. Of course, no problem. Yes, whether in the eyes of Jiang Hai or in the eyes of Knerson Peters, going down to play the game is just playing. It is far from what he has played before. Okay, then tell me his name, Knerson Peters. Hearing Knerson Peters' words, Jiang Hai also chuckled, and then reported to the waiter next to him. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the waiter immediately wrote it down. As for Knerson Peters, he gently moved his hands and feet. Although he had not played underground boxing for a while, he had not been idle. Usually, he played with Harriman Fells and Bell Lester. Sometimes, Jiang Hai would also come up to play. In the state of playing without killing, Jiang Hai was naturally the strongest, but he was also the second strongest. Of course, if it was a competition of marksmanship, then he was the weakest, but when it came to fighting, he was still quite confident. Originally, his body was abnormally strong, plus eating beef and fish in the manner and absorbing a lot of aura. Now, Knerson Peters was an out-and-out humanoid behemoth. After confirming that Knerson Peters would participate in the game, the waiter here also left. After a while, he brought a set of sportswear, which was prepared for Knerson Peters later. He could not let Knerson Peters wear a casual suit to play the game. After all, France was the fashion capital. They knew very well how much the suit on him was worth. Jiang Hai was very good to his subordinates, especially outside. It was inevitable that handmade suits were from luxury brands. This was also a reflection of strength. While Knerson Peters was changing, in another box far away, a Southern Caucasian had already changed and was looking at the information of his opponent. It's not John Vick, but it doesn't matter. No matter who it is, they can't stop me. Chapter 1032. At this time, there were a total of 7 people sitting in Pu Taimin's room. The person sitting in the main seat was naturally Pu Taimin, who was going to fight today. Park Taimin was 31 years old this year. He was of Korean descent in the United States. He had joined the United States Army in the early days and had almost become colleagues with Bell. They had entered the Triangle State, but unfortunately, he was afraid of death on the battlefield and had escaped by himself. He had led their team to be completely wiped out and the mission had failed. After the mission had failed, the United States Army had been looking for him, and he had quietly fled to Europe. There, he started to fight in the underground with the foundation of Taekwondo that he had practiced since he was a child. However, if Hua Xia's Kung Fu was 80% acting and 20% fighting, then South Korea's Taekwondo was 90% or even 100% acting. As the old saying goes, hands are 2 doors, and you have to rely on your feet to beat people. Taekwondo took this saying to the extreme. Taekwondo had no fist techniques at all. Their 2 hands were just decorations. As for the leg techniques, to be honest, other than looking good, there were no special skills. There were no high leg sweeps, chain kicks in the air, super chop, and so on. When fighting against amateurs, it was very intimidating. It looked fierce and fierce. However, in the eyes of a real master, these movements were only flaws. When he had just arrived in Europe, he had been beaten up badly by the underground boxing. Later, he pretended to be a Japanese and went to a dojo for Kyokushin karate. After learning Kyokushin karate there, he used this excuse to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Relying on the physical foundation that he had trained in Taekwondo, his fighting power began to improve. Although Taekwondo did not have much fighting power, it still had the effect of strengthening the body. John Vick was someone he met after he learned Brazilian jiu-jitsu. John Vick was indeed his master and had taught him before. However, he had never taught him the real core of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Even so, John Vick had made a name for himself in the underground boxing world. When John Vick was at his peak, he came out. An unknown South Korean fighter defeated John Vick, who was at his peak. Not only did he make a lot of money, but he also made a name for himself. Later, he switched to being a semi-professional. Now, he had quite a reputation. In South Korea and Europe, he had 4 dojos dedicated to teaching students. It was precisely because he had suffered a few losses at the hands of John Vick that this time, after Terrell King learned of his situation, he found him and offered him a large sum of money to invite him over. For people like Terrell King, money and face were more important than the latter. This person looks familiar, and he seems to be very strong. Looking at Pu Taimin's indifferent look, the other people in the room also came over and looked at the information in his hand, then a female voice said with some doubts. At this time, in Pu Taimin's room, there were a total of 7 people including him. 1 was his coach, 1 was his driver, and 2 were his girlfriends. In addition to these 4 people, there were 2 other people. They were none other than Han Jiaran and her husband, Yan Jingshuan, who had some relationship with Jiang Hai. Looking at this information, she felt that Knerson Peters was somewhat familiar. Hey, it doesn't matter. No matter how strong he is, how can he be stronger than Taimin? Don't joke around. Don't you know how strong Taimin is? Hearing her words, Yan Jingshuan on the other side also said with a smile, and at the same time, he also flattered Pu Taimin. When Yan Jingshuan was in South Korea, he often played with some famous young masters, which could be regarded as emotional investment. Kickboxing was a very popular event in South Korea. There were many people who fought in the UFC there, and they were also considered stars. They often participated in some reality shows, such as Kim Dongxian, Chui Hongwan, Chiu Qingshuan, and so on. Therefore, these young masters often played with these kickboxing masters. As a master in the European underground boxing world, Pu Taimin naturally had a considerable status in South Korea, so Yan Jingshuan also had some friendship with him. This time, when he came to France, he occasionally heard Pu Taimin mention that he had a dojo in France. Originally, he wanted to go and see it, but he happened to be in France, so he invited them to come and watch the competition in the evening. After all, this celebrity couple was also quite famous in South Korea. It was understandable that Pu Taimin had a good relationship with them, but when he looked at Han Jiaran, his eyes were shining. In South Korea, the view of beauty was extremely different from that of China. In South Korea, the highest goddess was Kim Taishi, but her reputation in China was really not very big. Next were Han Jiaran and Sun Yizhen. Although Song Huiqiao had many supporters, because there were too many rumors about her private life, she gave the public a feeling of dislike. Quan Jixin herself was a very introverted person, so these 2 actors who had a great reputation in China were not obvious in South Korea. On the contrary, they were not famous in China, but they were very famous in South Korea. Cough, Taimin. Maybe he felt Pu Taimin's gaze. Yan Jingshuan suddenly regretted bringing his wife here. Originally, he just wanted to show off his connections in front of Han Jiaran. He didn't want to send a sheep to the tiger's den. Oh, brother Jingshuan, it's almost time. I have to go and prepare. Hearing Yan Jingshuan's words, Pu Taimin was too embarrassed to be too obvious, so he just smiled, then went downstairs to prepare. There is something wrong with your friend. After watching Pu Taimin leave, Han Jiaran glanced at Yan Jingshuan and whispered. Yan Jingshuan could only smile awkwardly because he also felt that this situation was not right. But now, even if they felt that something was wrong, they couldn't leave. They could only pray that he was just watching. Soon, the host on the ring announced that tonight's competition was over. Next was the time for the private fights. The first round was Pu Taimin against Knerson Peters. These private fights could also raise the stakes, but in order to avoid underground fighting, these private fights would reveal the person behind the other party. This way, if they lost, underground fighting was one thing, but their face was another. There were not many big companies whose face was not worth tens of thousands of euros. Although it was a bet between Balian Mudun and Terrell King, Knerson Peters carried the name of Jiang Hai. Next, we will first introduce the fighter under Mr. Terrell King, from the legend of South Korea and Europe's underground fighting world, Pu Taimin. After confirming that there was no problem with both of them, the host also shouted with ambition to arouse the audience's emotions. Many of the spectators who came here were paying attention to black boxing. Although they couldn't say that Pu Taimin's name was well known, they still knew a thing or two about him. For a while, there were a lot of cheers and discussions coming over. Yeah, long live South Korea, Pu Taimin is the first. Under the attention of everyone, Pu Taimin also walked out with his own music. As soon as he walked out, the atmosphere of the audience on the field became even more uplifting. Jiang Hai, who was sitting on the balcony, looked at this person's movements and couldn't help but smile softly. This guy's performance was so stupid. Mr. Jiang, this time it's my fault. You really don't have to get involved in this mess. Looking at Jiang Hai's relish, Balian Mudun couldn't help but sigh. This time, he had really exhausted all his tricks. Let's pretend that today's incident didn't happen. We'll talk about other things at the negotiating table tomorrow. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He was not the kind of person who always tried to be nice. Whether this person lost face, lost money, and even whether he would be killed had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He just wanted Knerson Peters to slap South Korea's face, that was all. And now looking at South Korea's arrogant attitude, Jiang Hai felt that his decision was really right. After South Korea's cockiness on the stage for almost 5 minutes, it was Knerson Peters' turn to appear. However, compared to the South Stick, his entrance was much calmer. In fact, he was the only one who walked out calmly. The next contestant from the blue team is Mr. Jiang Hai's fighter, Conrad Peters. Looking at Knerson Peters walking over, the host here also looked a little weak. Although it seems that Knerson Peters is much bigger than Pu Tae-min, in this ring, there are many cases of big people being knocked down by small people. Because joint skills are allowed here, not simple boxing. Being bigger may not be of much use at this time. Seeing Knerson Peters walk into the ring, the whispers in the audience became louder. Everyone didn't know which side to bet on. Bet €500 for me, Knerson Peters. Looking at the indifferent Connorson, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Then, I will also bet €500. In a sense, Jiang Hai is also standing up for himself. Naturally, Balian Mudun will not miss this opportunity to express goodwill, but Jiang Hai didn't care about his move. Okay, the bet is over. About 3 minutes later, the host received the message that it was almost time and was about to announce the start, but at this time, Jiang Hai in the second floor box suddenly stood up and shouted at the field. Connorson. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone looked at Jiang Hai. They wanted to see what this person was going to say. Since you bear my name, then let's have a good fight here. Ignoring everyone's eyes, Jiang Hai looked at Knerson Peters standing there and said loudly. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Knerson Peters also grinned and looked at Pu Tae-min with only pity. Chapter 1033. The first round, start. After the introduction of both sides, the referee stretched out his hand and said directly to the two men. After hearing the referee's words, Pu Tae-min did not immediately come up to fist bump. Instead, he stood in place and did a very famous continuous kick in Taekwondo. The extremely fast speed and the handsome movements naturally caused many women to scream. Listening to these screams, Pu Tae-min also smiled. 20 seconds is enough to deal with you. Looking at Knerson Peters, Pu Tae-min said with an arrogant face. Hearing his words, Knerson Peters just looked at him calmly. He felt that this guy was sick. Under the referee's signal, the two men stepped forward and bumped fists. Because they were playing MMA, which was unrestricted fighting, the two men did not wear boxing gloves, but the UFC gloves that exposed the fingers. At the beginning of the game, Pu Tae-min attacked first. His 2 feet were constantly rubbing on the ground, changing his position and circling around Knerson Peters. Knerson Peters just stood in place and looked at him indifferently, waiting to see what tricks he was going to play. Maybe he felt that he had tested enough. Pu Tae-min stepped on his right foot without saying a word. In an instant, his body speed reached the limit and rushed toward Knerson Peters' lower body. If the small man fought the big man, there was a 90% chance that he would not be able to beat the opponent. What's more, Knerson Peters was more than 2 meters tall. It was really scary standing there. If he stood there and fought, no matter how high his feet were, he would not be able to hit the opponent. Therefore, when the small man and the big man competed, or even fought, as long as they rolled together, they would have the advantage. An inch longer, an inch stronger, and an inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. This was not a joke. The reason why Pu Tae-min was so famous in Europe was that he learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Kyokushin karate. His combat effectiveness on the ground was quite strong. When he rushed over, he would directly hit the opponent's abdomen in the next second. Then, he would knock the man down, and the ground would be his world. But Knerson Peters's combat experience was not worse than him. Although his brain was not very good, he was absolutely not careless when fighting. If it was in the black boxing arena where life and death was not a matter of life and death, he might have directly grabbed the opponent's head and kneed him. But here, attacking the opponent's head would be a loss, so he just stretched out his big hand and instantly pressed the man's shoulder. The huge force made Pu Taimin completely unable to move in an instant. Damn it! Feeling the huge force from Knerson Peters, Pu Taimin could not help but clench his teeth. He thought that Knerson Peters would be very strong. After all, he was big, but he did not expect this guy to be so strong. After being pressed down, since he could not attack head-on, he would attack from below. Pu Taimin thought of this and instantly slipped under his feet. He rolled directly and instantly lay on the ground. Then, his two legs, one in front and one behind, clamped the bend of Knerson Peters's legs. This was also a basic skill in fighting. It could make a big man with a high center of gravity fall because of losing his center of gravity. But unfortunately, this also depended on the opponent's level. Knerson Peters was originally very strong. Now that he had nothing to do, he trained at home every day. In addition, he ate beef and fish with spiritual energy. His physical fitness had far exceeded that of ordinary people. It was not a problem to say that he was infinitely close to the limit of human beings. Of course, it was only in terms of strength. So although it was a joint technique, Knerson Peters's legs did not even bend. Looking at his movements, Knerson Peters could not help but bend down to grab his legs. Seeing Knerson Peters bend down, the man's eyes could not help but light up. Then, he instantly supported his wrist and kicked Knerson Peters's chin. Although Taekwondo was not very effective in fighting, the strength of the legs was very strong. Moreover, for a sure kill opportunity like this, there was still some morality. So when he saw Knerson Peters bending down, Pu Taimin could not help but laugh in his heart. This time, he would definitely win. He was already thinking about his next move. This kick hit Knerson Peters's chin, making him dizzy. Then, he stood up with a carp flip, followed by a knee strike, and then rode on his body. His two hands kept hitting his opponent's head. Well, this was the end of the match. However, although he had thought it through well, and had even thought about how to flirt with Hanja after the game, things were not as simple as he thought. Just as his foot was about to hit Knerson Peters' right hand, which had been idle all this time, suddenly reached out and grabbed his ankle in front of his surprised eyes. This is bad. Seeing Knerson Peters's action, Pu Taimin shouted in his heart, but he did not panic. Instead, he used his other foot to kick Knerson Peters's face in an instant, trying to pull his foot back. But unfortunately, Knerson Peters did not give him this opportunity. When he grabbed his ankle, Knerson Peters had already stood up abruptly, then swung it directly. Then, under the surprised and puzzled eyes of the audience and the referee, he directly swung his leg up and slammed it heavily into the ring in front of him, bang. With a loud noise, Pu Taimin was directly smashed into the ring. Fortunately, the ring was hollow, and it was just a piece of cloth, not a real concrete floor. Otherwise, this would be enough to make him half dead. But Knerson Peters did not stop there. He grabbed Pu Taimin's leg, and when Pu Taimin was powerless to resist and his whole body was sore, he smashed Pu Taimin 7 times, just like how the Hulk smashed Loki in Avengers. He grabbed Pu Taimin's leg and smashed him to the ground. Perhaps after 7 smashes, he remembered the rules and casually threw Pu Taimin to the side. But at this time, Pu Taimin had already fainted and lost consciousness. His eyes were white, his mouth was crooked, and his body was like noodles. At least a few bones were broken. If it were not for his chest that was still moving up and down slightly, it could be concluded that he was dead. When the referee saw this situation, he reacted immediately and immediately called the medical staff who had been prepared for a long time. What else is there to say? Send him to the hospital immediately. Looking at those people who were busy there, Knerson Peters couldn't help but smile disdainfully. Can't even withstand a single blow. Saying the words that Jiang Hai had taught him, Knerson Peters slowly walked to the side of the field, then opened the door and went out. He did not return to the locker room, but went straight to the stairs on the second floor. Looking at Knerson Peters, who walked over, the audience was silent. Everyone looked at him with only horror in their eyes. Even Terrell Jean in the box next to Jiang Hai's, and Balian Madan, who wanted to discuss business with Jiang Hai, were so scared that they couldn't close their mouths. As for Madan's bodyguard and driver, he looked at Knerson Peters with 30% vigilance, 20% horror, and 50% fear. He didn't know how many rounds he could last in the hands of this big guy. But judging from the current situation, he shouldn't be able to hold on for more than a minute. At this time, in Park Tae-min's room, seeing that he was beaten to the point that even his mother couldn't recognize him, his coach, driver, and his two girlfriends quickly fled. As for Han Jiaran and Yen Jingxuan, after looking at each other, they also left quietly. Just now, they felt that Park Tae-min was up to no good. If they didn't leave now, when would they? Good job. Jiang Hai didn't know about these things, and he wasn't clear about it. Looking at Knerson Peters, who was walking back, Jiang Hai said to him with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Knerson Peters also smiled honestly. For him, he was Jiang Hai's boxing glove. He would beat whoever Jiang Hai asked him to. He picked up his clothes next to him and went to the bathroom to change again. Then he stood behind Jiang Hai, just like before. But at this time, Balian Madan and the others had to pay more attention to him than to Jiang Hai. Mr. Jiang, this warrior, where did you hire him? Looking at Knerson Peters, Balian Madan thought for a moment and asked. If he also had such a warrior, his personal safety wouldn't be a problem. If he brought him to such a fighting arena in the future, TSK, how glorious would that be? So after hesitating for a moment, he still asked. Oh, he wasn't hired, he's my family. Hearing Balian Madan's words, Jiang Hai smiled. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Balian Madan also nodded indifferently. He understood what Jiang Hai meant. Don't even think about hiring him, and the most important thing is, how much money does Jiang Hai have? He knows very well. So there's no need to say anything like a price. When the time comes, Jiang Hai will slap him in the face, and it will be a resounding slap. After giving up on this thought, Balian Madan continued to talk with Jiang Hai. He acted as if nothing happened just now, so he had to admit that this guy is a very good businessman. After the two chatted together for a while, they left here. As for the later program, they naturally didn't need to. Looking at the two people around Jiang Hai who were qualified to be celebrities, Balian Madan didn't want to leave a bad impression on his wife. So after the two left here, they parted ways. Jiang Hai and the others returned directly to the hotel. They still have to continue the negotiation tomorrow. Chapter 1034. Jiang Hai's character, how should one describe it? Everyone should have some understanding of him, and he had been afraid of his own character more than once. This guy was cunning, lazy, and greedy. His only strength might be that he was not slippery. He was more serious about everything, and he would not fool others. He had poor self-control. When facing beautiful women, although he would not be a pervert, nor would he be despised by others, as long as beautiful women pushed him, the success rate was still quite high. Moreover, when facing his own women, he did not know how to reject them. Of course, this was only limited to the women around him. As for those outsiders, they only wanted money, and Jiang Hai would not care about them. Jiang Hai really had many shortcomings. He was greedy, lecherous, gluttonous, lazy, unsympathetic, disunited, and would not work hard for the rise of the nation and the country. It could be said that people who were on the moral high ground would feel that Jiang Hai was problematic, and no matter how they looked at him, they would not find him pleasing to the eye. However, Jiang Hai was like this, and he did not change his mind after hearing their words. Moreover, he also had a problem, and that was, he did not have a passion for anything. In the past, he wanted to raise chickens, but now the chickens were basically raised by Daliana and Marian, and by the way, the wyverns were also raised by them. When he wanted to grow vegetables, the vegetables were all taken care of by Chi Jia and the others, including rice. After the initial stage was done, he did not care about it anymore. Every day, Chi Jia and the others were patrolling. He did not help with raising cows, catching fish, or playing. In the past, he wanted to play basketball, so he specially built a warehouse to be used as a basketball court, but now he did not need it. It could be said that Jiang Hai's patience was extremely poor, and his character was very easy to give up, but God was so blind. The Dragon Ball that could change everyone's fate was in his hands, and no one could do anything about it. If it was in the hands of someone who loved the country, maybe it would be dissected and studied. Of course, Jiang Hai was just imagining things. He was now lying on a deck chair next to the swimming pool on the top floor of the hotel, calmly basking in the sun, drinking juice, and playing with his phone. Yes, he had no interest in negotiations. After 2 days of negotiations, Jiang Hai's excitement had worn off. The next night, he specially asked Jing Jin to send 2 people over to take over the negotiations. He was a little tired. After stating his bottom line, on the 3rd day, he no longer cared about anything. If it were someone else, they might go to France to play when they had nothing to do, but Jiang Hai wasn't interested. He had already been to the landmark buildings in France, and there was nothing new about it. Therefore, he was prepared to force himself to return to the state he was in when he was in the manor. Just like now, he was sunbathing and playing here. Although the spiritual energy here was far worse than the one in the manor, it was still good to bask in the sun occasionally. Just as Jiang Hai was happily basking in the sun, 2 figures came over from a distance. Looking at the 2 figures, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. They hadn't left yet. Yes, the 2 people were none other than Han Jiaran and Yan Jingshuan. Jiang Hai didn't see them yesterday, so he thought they had left. Now, it seemed that they weren't ready to go back so soon. Thinking about it, although they weren't as rich as him, they were still famous actors in South Korea. Their income wasn't low, so it wouldn't be a problem for them to play in France for a while. When Jiang Hai was looking at them, they also saw Jiang Hai. Yan Jingshuan couldn't help but excitedly wave at Jiang Hai. Although Han Jiaran didn't mention anything about Jiang Hai, he had roughly inquired about him these days. He knew that the man who helped them solve the housing problem was a rich man, a very rich man. The status of South Korean artists was actually not very high, at least compared with businessmen and so on. It was indeed a little worse. Now that he had the opportunity to meet Jiang Hai, Yan Jingshuan walked over with a smile after seeing Jiang Hai. "Hello, Mr. Jiang, are you basking in the sun here?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Yan Jingshuan said with a smile. "Oh, hello, you also came to bask in the sun?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also raised his head and said with a smile. "Yes, I'm a little tired from walking these 2 days. Today, I'm going to have a good rest in the hotel." "What is Mr. Jiang doing?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Yan Jingshuan said with a smile. "Oh, I'm playing with WeChat." Jiang Hai said while showing this thing a little. "It's a social network. I'm not very good at this. Usually, it's my manager who does it." Although he doesn't know what WeChat is, South Korea also has a similar thing called KT, but Yan Jingshuan himself doesn't play with these things. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could only laugh, then ignored him and continued to play with his mobile phone. Seeing that he killed the conversation, Yan Jingshuan was also a little embarrassed, but fortunately, he quickly recovered. After lying here for a while, some passing foreign girls were about to steal his soul away. After saying something to the Korean woman next to him, he plunged into the water and went to find the foreign girl who had just flirted with him. "It seems that your husband is still not very honest." Looking at Yan Jingshuan, who quickly hid in the water and played with some foreign girls, Jiang Hai put the phone aside and said calmly. Although Jiang Hai didn't look at her, Han Jiaran also knew that this bastard was talking to her. "This is our family matter, it has nothing to do with you." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, she bit her lip. Although she has always wanted to avoid Jiang Hai, sometimes fate is so bullshit. She always wants to avoid him, but she always inadvertently meets him. TSK, well, let's not talk about him. I haven't seen you for so long, did you miss me? Turning his head to look at the Korean woman, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the Korean woman over there was about to go crazy. This guy is too shameless. What do you mean by that? Not daring to look at Jiang Hai, the Korean woman looked straight ahead and said to Jiang Hai, who was across the recliner. It's the literal meaning. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also teased her. If Jiang Hai has made any progress over the years, it must be that his level of flirting with girls is in a straight line. After all, real knowledge comes from practice. His practical experience is quite rich. He is not the person who was forcefully pushed by Aphrodite and didn't know what to do. Bastard. Snorting at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaren really couldn't stay here any longer. She picked up her towel and was about to leave. Looking at her back, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and left behind her. As for Yan Jingshuan, he was still having fun in the water. Following Jiang Hai walked into the hotel, but just as she took the elevator, Jiang Hai also walked in. Seeing Jiang Hai coming in, she couldn't resist. Just when she wanted to press the button for her floor, Jiang Hai grabbed her hand, and then Jiang Hai pressed the elevator for his floor. You, what are you doing? Seeing that Jiang Hai contacted her and didn't let her press the elevator button, the Korean woman panicked a little. She couldn't help but struggle a little, trying to shake off Jiang Hai's hand. Don't waste your energy. There are surveillance cameras here. If you keep making trouble and bring the security guards here, you and I won't be able to cover it. Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, the Korean man's blood almost went cold by half. You beast, didn't you say you would keep it a secret? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, she finally stopped struggling, but she still gritted her teeth and said. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled. Yeah, I didn't tell your husband and others. Don't worry, my mouth is very tight. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then said to her. He didn't know why, but this woman always gave Jiang Hai a feeling of wanting to bully her. As for whether her face was fake or not, it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Anyway, Jiang Hai couldn't take her back, right? You, shameless. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the Korean woman said angrily, but just after she finished speaking, Jiang Hai turned back and kissed her on the mouth. When the two lips met, Jiang Hai also began to attack. After a long time, when she recovered from that feeling, they had already arrived at Jiang Hai's floor. Jiang Hai didn't say anything, he directly carried her in his arms and walked into his suite. After entering the suite, the two didn't say much, since it has already come to this. Then let's start. Normal, back, standing, sky train. I don't understand what you are talking about. An hour later, the Korean woman was lying in front of Jiang Hai's indescribable existence. Why is there no progress? Didn't you train? Where can I train? Do you want me to train with others? Staring at Jiang Hai, the Korean woman said very unhappily. No, but didn't your husband do this with you? Hearing the Korean woman's words, Jiang Hai was really embarrassed. With that person, how is it possible? Hearing Jiang Hai talk about this topic, the Korean woman's face suddenly turned red and she couldn't help but say with some embarrassment. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shake his head. Such beautiful lips, I can't even do it 10 times a day, how can he endure it? Looking at the Korean woman, Jiang Hai said with a smile, then felt a little pain. If you talk nonsense again, I'm leaving. Glaring at Jiang Hai, the Korean woman said with shame and anger. Good. You are the best. If you need anything in the future, remember to call me. A day as husband and wife means endless grace. No matter what, I can help you once. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai said in a rare serious tone. Chapter 1035. Really? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Corin couldn't help but raise her head in surprise. She knew that Jiang Hai would never like her. Of course, she wouldn't like Jiang Hai either. They are together, in fact, more for each other's needs. She didn't intend to ask Jiang Hai for anything, but now Jiang Hai said that he could help her once in the future. She was a little surprised. She knew how powerful Jiang Hai was. If such a man said that he could help her once, then he could probably solve anything in the country. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt that she didn't suffer a loss. Not only did she get to enjoy the powerful existence of Jiang Hai, but she also got a promise. Thinking of this, she vomited even harder. Not bad, do you want to do it again? Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked with a smile. Yes, but it has to be fast, that person may be aware of it soon. Hearing Jiang Hai's suggestion, Corin hesitated and nodded. Sometimes it's really hard to tell who is taking advantage of who, isn't it? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also directly picked up his gun and the battle began again. About 40 minutes later, Yan Jingshuan, who was having a good time, finally found that his wife was gone, Jiang Hai was also gone, and no one answered his phone, so he returned to his room with a suspicious attitude. As a result, after coming back, he found that his wife was sitting on the sofa and watching TV with her legs crossed. Looking at the half-eaten potato chips next to her, it was obvious that she had been back for a while. Seeing this scene, Yan Jingshuan was relieved. When did you come back? Why didn't you tell me? I called your cell phone, but no one answered. While preparing to walk to the bathroom, Yan Jingshuan said to her, but his eyes were looking at her, waiting for Corin's answer. What did I say to you? I was afraid to disturb your flirting mood with the little girl. The phone ran out of battery in the bag. She rolled her eyes at Yan Jingshuan and said indifferently. Hearing her words, Yan Jingshuan smiled awkwardly. It was indeed difficult to accept. Then he walked into the bathroom to take a shower. After he entered the bathroom, Han Jiaran heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at the 71% battery on her phone, she couldn't help but curl her lips and continue eating potato chips. This small episode was really just a small episode. In the evening, Jiang Hai received news that the negotiations were almost done. Balian Mudan was also very persistent. The price could be raised to 20%, or even 21%. However, he not only wanted Europe, but also the special rights in the Middle East. However, those people were not sure about this idea, so they still talked to Jiang Hai in the evening. Jiang Hai was already a little bored here, so he waved his hand. So be it. The Middle East was given to him. Anyway, Du Feimin didn't know that Jiang Hai produced red wine here. After this idea was made, they could sign the contract tomorrow. Of course, before that, they still had to fight for the profits they should get. 1% of the price was also a small amount of money. According to Jiang Hai's $800 per bottle, 1% was $8 per bottle. If he wanted 10,000 bottles, it would be $80,000, and 50,000 bottles would be $400,000. How could he earn this money? Moreover, if this brand became famous, Jiang Hai's $2,000 per bottle would be $20. 50,000 bottles would be $1 million, 100,000 bottles would be $2 million, and 1 million bottles would be $20 million. Although he didn't care about this small amount of money, well, look at his arrogance. He couldn't just give it to the other party for free, right? After confirming the policy, the person in charge of the negotiation went back to his suite to sleep. Dulles Gerard breathed a sigh of relief. He could once again generate income for the manor. He could also look forward to this year's income. Jiang Hai continued to sleep with Azalina and Wallace Shelley in his arms. Wallace Shelley's two indescribable existences were quite gorgeous and extraordinarily large. Jiang Hai's hands were not small. He could easily catch a basketball with one hand, but he couldn't catch her with one hand. Both hands couldn't completely wrap around her. Coupled with her white skin, deep 5 points of view, and golden hair, she was quite attractive. Jiang Hai couldn't put her down. Most importantly, she was very open. As long as Jiang Hai said something, as long as Jiang Hai wanted it, she would do it. Therefore, she was also one of Jiang Hai's favorite people in the manor besides Qi and Ai Xiaoxi. Although he fought with the Han Jia people twice during the day, at night, Jiang Hai was always energetic when facing Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Naturally, there was another battle at night. After the battle, Jiang Hai also fell asleep with them in his arms. But just as he fell asleep, a burst of urgent ringtone sounded. When he picked it up, Jiang Hai found that the person who called was not someone else, but Qi Li. Although he was a little confused, because they just finished the phone call today, just when they were negotiating the contract, why did she call again now? Hello, Qi Li, what's the matter? After picking up the phone, Jiang Hai asked Qi Li on the other side of the phone. Jiang, my mother is in the hospital. Jiang Hai's voice just fell. Qi Li on the other side had already said with a trace of sobbing. Wait, slow down. What's the situation? How did she get hospitalized? Hearing Qi Li's sobbing words, Jiang Hai immediately asked. At this time, Du Ning, who had been staying beside Qi Li, snatched the phone. Jing Xiua called Sister Qi just now and told her that the old lady suddenly fainted. She couldn't explain it clearly, so Sister Qi asked her to call 120. Just now, the ambulance arrived and said that the old lady might have an acute heart attack. Now, she has been sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. The specific situation is still unclear. We have already booked the plane tickets and will set off immediately. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Ning quickly told what had happened. Okay, I am relieved that you are with Qi Li. I will call Qi Jia and Qi Ya immediately and arrange for them to return to Huaxia immediately. I am now in France. I will call the crew members immediately and return to Bing City. Hearing Du Ning's words, Jiang Hai had never been so relieved to leave Du Ning with Qi Li. At this time, they were still quite reliable. After comforting Du Ning for a while, Jiang Hai had already gotten up. Azalina and Wallace Shelley had already gotten up when they heard Jiang Hai's voice on the phone. While putting on their clothes, they called the crew members. Although it was in the middle of the night, it was Jiang Hai's plane. Jiang Hai directly gave the crew 3 times the bonus, so the crew members all got up. They lived near the airport and began to repair the plane after they arrived. After putting on his clothes, Jiang Hai found Dulles Gerard and authorized him to be in charge of tomorrow's negotiations. He directly told him that he would directly throw out the contract for tomorrow's negotiations. The Middle East and Europe could be given to him, with a 20% discount. If it was acceptable, he would sign the contract. If not, it would be cancelled directly. After learning that Jiang Hai had something to do, Dulles Gerard also nodded. He knew Jiang Hai's temper and character. He valued his family very much. Not to mention wine, even if it was beef or fish, he would give them up. This was his character. This was also the reason why so many people were loyal to him. While rushing to the airport, Jiang Hai also woke up Qi Jia and Qi Ya. At the same time, he booked the earliest flight to the capital for them. Because Jiang Hai was not there, he deliberately transferred Biliak back from the Tinglong company to ensure the safety of the girls. One of them would drive the 2 sisters to New York. After arranging everything here, Jiang Hai immediately called Qi Li. Although he and Qi Li had been quarreling, Jiang Hai still respected Qi Li's mother very much. After all, she was also his mother-in-law, and she helped him when he needed help the most. Now that her parents had passed away, it could be said that she was also his family, so he was also very anxious. At this time, Qi Li's mood had calmed down a little. Du Ning drove the car, and the 2 were now rushing to the airport. Qi Li was also a little calmer now. When Jiang Hai went to arrange things, she also called the hospital. At this time, her mother had been pushed into the operating room, and it was preliminarily confirmed that she had an acute heart attack. Perhaps because the Qi family was originally quite rich and well-connected, there were no accidents. The doctors were quite ethical. When the ambulance came, they immediately performed the surgery and waited for the family to come back. At about 3:00 in the morning in France, Jiang Hai, Azalina, and Wallace Shelley got on the plane to Bing City. Because this was Jiang Hai's own plane, there was no need to make a detour in the capital. As for Qi Jia and Qi Ya, they had to make a detour in the capital. They really didn't expect that such a thing would happen inexplicably. It was really a misfortune for their family. The next morning, before Yan Jingxuan got up, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment and decided to go to Jianghai. Of course, she didn't go to see him. She just wanted to come and see him. But when she arrived at Jianghai's room, she found that he was gone. Only some housekeepers were there, cleaning up the room. Hey! Has the person who lives here left? Looking at the spotless room, Han Jiaran asked with some doubts. Oh. It's you. Mr. Zhang's family suddenly had an accident, so he left first. What's the matter? At this time, Dulles Gerard and Knerson Peters in the next suite came out. Looking at Han Jiaran, Dulles Gerard said with a smile. He still had some impression of this South Korean. Oh, no, nothing. Then I'll leave first. Hearing that Jiang Hai had left, Han Jiaran didn't know why she suddenly felt a little empty in her heart. Fortunately, she was an actress. After quickly hiding it, she hurried downstairs. Chapter 1036. Of course, Jiang Hai did not know what happened in France at this time. For him, if he knew that Han Jia had come to find him, he would not feel lucky. Instead, he would feel a little worried. What a joke. He did not intend to have a close relationship with this South Korean. So be it. However, it was impossible for him to bring her home. It was impossible for him to risk such universal condemnation. But sometimes, not knowing anything was also a kind of happiness. Phew, here we are. Wrapping his coat, Jiang Hai glanced at the covered bridge in front of him, and then walked into the Taiping International Airport in Bingqing with Azalina and Wallace Shelley in the morning sun. Although there was a 6-hour time difference between Paris and the United States, the flight time was only 2 hours apart. It took about 13 hours to fly from the capital to the United States, and 11 hours to fly from the capital to Paris. Jiang Hai's private jet could control the speed of the flight, but it still took him 10 hours to fly. Jiang Hai got on the plane at 3:00 in the morning in France. The imperial capital was 7 hours faster than Paris. That is to say, when they took off, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning in China. After flying for more than 10 hours, when they landed, it was already 9:00 in the evening, which was 21 o'clock. Although Bing City was called Little Paris in the east, the weather here was indeed worse than Paris. Of course, the highest temperature every day was about the same. It was the end of April, and the temperature was almost 20 degrees during the day. But at night, it was much colder in Bing City than in Paris, which was 10 degrees. When Jiang Hai got off the plane and walked out of the airport, he saw Du Ning, who came to pick them up at the airport parking lot. When they were on the plane, Jiang Hai had received the news that Qi Li's mother had been rescued, but the doctor also said that the situation was not very good. She needed a stent. Otherwise, the next time she fell ill, no one knew what would happen. However, as long as they could be saved, it was a good thing that nothing happened to them immediately. That was why Jiang Hai and the others didn't have to be so anxious. How's the situation? Sitting in Du Ning's Rolls-Royce, Jiang Hai asked her. She's fine. The old lady has already woken up. She knows people, but her mental state is normal. She's weak. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this might be the best answer. If their mental state was particularly good, then it might be troublesome. As the old saying goes, the final radiance of the setting sun. Look at those who had been sick for a long time. If one day they suddenly became energetic, could walk, and could eat and drink, then it meant that the situation was bad. At this time, it was useless to go to the hospital because no symptoms could be detected. However, it was estimated that it would be over in a few days. It was difficult to explain with science, but Jiang Hai had seen it with his own eyes. Now that he knew that the old lady was still alive, Jiang Hai was relieved, but after being relieved, his brows also wrinkled. The things in Jiang Hai's manner all have spiritual energy. Not to say that after eating it, it can cure all diseases, but it can also strengthen the body. Since Jiang Hai began to raise cattle and fish, not to mention Jiang Hai, who has the Dragon Ball. Even his employees, as well as those girls, didn't even catch a cold. All of them were quite healthy. Qi Jia often joked that she was useless as a doctor. Qi Li was a very filial daughter. In the beginning, before Jiang Hai and her got back together, she would also take back the beef she got from Jiang Hai to her mother to eat. Later, when Jiang Hai wanted to get closer to her, he couldn't be stingy with the food, not to mention how much could his mother-in-law and Jing Xiu eat. So he would send them once every 10 days to half a month. If they ate Jiang Hai's beef and fish, they would have a heart attack. To be honest, he didn't understand. Could it be that beef and fish are useless in Huaxia? Impossible. I went to Qi Li's restaurant to eat. Although the spiritual energy dissipated a little, there was still spiritual energy. What's going on? Sitting in the back seat, Jiang Hai touched his chin and thought. He really couldn't understand it. Unknowingly, the car had already driven to the hospital parking lot. After Jiang Hai and the others got out of the car, they walked into an intensive care unit. When they walked in, they found that Qi Li's mother had just fallen asleep. Qi Li was sitting beside her at this time, touching her hand and looking at her face. Feeling that someone came in, Qi Li also raised her head. When she saw that it was Jiang Hai, her eyes couldn't help but flash a trace of tears. It's okay, I'm here. How is our mother? Looking at Qi Li's eyes, Jiang Hai also walked over and pressed his big hand on her head, then looked at his mother-in-law lying in front of him and asked Qi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Fortunately, the doctor said that it was a myocardial infarction. If it had been 10 minutes later, it might have been dangerous. Now that he has been given medicine to dredge the blood vessels, he woke up for a while and was a little confused, then he fell asleep again. Hearing what Qi Li said, Jiang Hai also looked at his mother-in-law in front of him. He looked left and right, but he didn't feel a trace of spiritual qi in her body. However, the old lady's complexion was still quite good when she went back during the new year. How could it be possible that Qi Li's mother had become like this in just a few months? It should be known that Qi Li's mother was only in her 50s this year. Moreover, she had never suffered any hardships in her life. She had been living a good life since she was in her 30s. Usually, she paid attention to her health. Jiang Hai was a little puzzled that he would have a heart attack in such a situation, so he had to ask clearly. Du Ning, take care of my mother-in-law first. Qi Li, come out for a while. Glancing at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said to Du Ning, then walked out first. The old lady was fine now, which was the most important thing, but the reason still had to be investigated. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also let go of her mother's hand and followed Jiang Hai to the corridor. When they turned to a place where there was no one, Jiang Hai looked at Qi Li. I suspect that our mother may have been tricked by someone else. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai said directly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyes were instantly stunned. Are you kidding me? Someone dares to trick my mother? This is courting death. Are you sure? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with killing intent. Jiang Hai also nodded gently. The beef and fish in my manor have a special substance in them. Not only can it make the fish and beef delicious, but most importantly, it can also make people's health better and better. I will send those ingredients to our mother every 10 days or half a month. Logically speaking, she eats those things every day. Let alone having a heart attack, it is impossible for her to have a cold or fever. But after I came here today, our mother's face was a little dark. She probably didn't eat my beef and fish after the new year. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. He and Qi Li have that kind of relationship, and they are also partners. She naturally noticed that Jiang Hai's beef and fish are a little different. She also eats them every day. Indeed, she doesn't have any disease, and even if she is tired the day before, after eating and sleeping, she will be 100 times more energetic the next day. She originally thought that this might be the power of love. But now it seems that this should be the power of beef and fish. Jiang Hai's food has such a special effect. She was just guessing and was not sure. Now she is sure, but she will not ask Jiang Hai how to do it. Are you suspecting that there is a mole? My mother's things are generally taken care of by Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi was raised by our family. She will not do anything bad to us. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, Qi Li said with some hesitation. I'm not saying that it must be her. Let's wait and see. I'm just telling you about the situation. As for the specifics, we have to investigate again. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai sighed. If this matter is really done by Jing Xiao Yi, Qi Li, and the others will be quite sad. After all, raising an ingrate is quite a headache. By the way, is your red wine contract going well? After talking about the old lady, Qi Li also wanted to change her mind, so she asked Jiang Hai about his red wine business. Who knows? I asked Dulles Gerard to talk about it. It's only about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Paris. There shouldn't be a definite answer yet. There should be a letter in 2 or 3 hours. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shook his head and said. He really didn't know how the negotiations in Paris were going, but thinking about it, with Dulles Gerard, he won't let him suffer. Besides, he has already explained where his bottom line is. Alas, I really can't tell that you have left me further and further behind in the past 2 or 3 years. I really regret it a little. If I had given up when I married you and let you help me in the company, would the cheese enterprise be bigger now and we would be more intimate? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li took a deep breath. She was too young and impetuous at the beginning. If she had accepted her fate earlier, she didn't know if there would have been a better result. After Jiang Hai heard her words, he also chuckled and didn't say anything, because he knew his own situation. The reason why he had such achievements now was inseparable from his possession of the Dragon Balls. If Qi Li really accepted him at the beginning, would he still have the Dragon Balls? No one knows, because every timeline is different. Chapter 1037. It was a quiet night. In fact, there was nothing much to talk about. After all, they were in the hospital, and they had to be quiet. Qi Li and Du Ning stayed with him for the whole night. Jiang Hai went to the place where the beds were rented and rented 2 more military uniforms. Fortunately, the ward was big enough. Originally, 4 people had to stay in a ward like this. Now that it was changed into an intensive care unit, there were only 2 beds. However, it was not a problem to put up 2 more beds in other places. After letting Azalina and Wallace Shelley stay for the night, Jiang Hai went to the car and spent the night in it. The next morning, Jiang Hai got out of the car with a yawn. He had to admit that it was really tiring to spend the night in the car. Jiang Hai was still tall, and the Rolls-Royce had a lot of space. However, Jiang Hai was lying in the front, and his legs were empty. He could not lie in the back, and it was very uncomfortable. He either had to curl his neck or empty legs. Fortunately, with his strong physique, he recovered after a few hours of sleep. At dawn, he got out of the car. The sun rose very early in Bing City. In summer, the sun rose at around 3 a.m. In winter, it was the shortest day, and the sun rose at around 6 a.m. When Jiang Hai went to school in the past, he had to get up early to take the bus. Every day, he would wake up at 5:30 a.m., have breakfast, wash up, and then leave at 6 a.m. He would take the bus at one stop, and it would take him about an hour to get to his high school. The arrival time of his high school was 7:10 a.m., and he could only leave at this time. Therefore, Jiang Hai was very used to the weather in Bing City. Although it was not winter now, and for some other places, spring might have ended. But for Bing City, winter had just ended. Although the temperature at night would not drop below 0, it would be at least 3 or 4 degrees. The temperature difference between day and night was very big. It was quite cold in the morning when the sun rose. But even so, because the sun rose early, the people in Bing City also went to work early. Jiang Hai got out of the car and stretched his stiff neck. Looking at the distance, there were already a lot of people moving around. Some were students going to school, some were employees going to work, and some were sanitation workers. Taking advantage of the fact that there were fewer people in the morning, they quickly cleaned up the debris on the road. Let's get something to eat. After stretching for a while, he looked at the time. It was already 5 a.m. Jiang Hai touched his stomach, which had only eaten one meal on the plane yesterday, and whispered. Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone to check. There was a morning market nearby, and he did not drive. He used the GPS to drive there. The morning market was one of the more unique places in Huaxia. In addition to selling breakfast, there were also a lot of things that were sold there. Vegetables, seafood, meat, fruits, and general merchandise were sold there. It could be said that everything could be found there. There used to be a morning market near Jiang Hai's house. When he was in school, he liked to go there to buy a fire spoon to eat. This fire spoon wasn't made with fire. Although Jiang Hai suspected that the people here learned it after listening to the crosstalk, they didn't really learn it. This was because the fire-steamed ladles in the Central Plains were similar to meat sandwiches. It was completely different from the steamed ladles in Bing City. This steamed ladle was made with bread and meat, and then it was fried in a pan of oil. It could also be said that it was fried and eaten after it was cooked. Although it was not difficult to cook, it tasted good. Jiang Hai liked this steamed ladle since he was young. These few years, when he was in the US, he would occasionally fry it and eat it. It was quite good. Other than the steamed ladles, the breakfast in Bing City was quite rich. The big fruits were fried and piping hot. There were also wontons, ramen, tofu pudding, etc. To be honest, if Feng Yu did not eat them for a long time, he would miss them. According to the navigation, Jiang Hai found the morning market here. At a glance, both sides of the street were selling things. Some urban management officers were here to maintain law and order. Perhaps this was one of the few places where they could be so harmonious. The reason why the morning market was called the morning market was because it didn't open during the day. The morning market had to be finished before 7:30 in the morning. Around 8 o'clock in the morning peak, there would be no more. Just like the night market also had to wait until the evening peak to be over before it could open. Jiang Hai was very familiar with the morning market. After he entered, he saw the 200 renminbi he asked from Qili yesterday. It was enough to buy breakfast. After entering the morning market, Jiang Hai went straight to the steamed ladle stall and bought 40 steamed ladles. These ladles were very small. Men could only eat one steamed ladle in one bite, and women could only eat one steamed ladle in 2 bites. After buying 40 steamed ladles, Jiang Hai went to buy big fruits, fried dough sticks, and some soy milk and tofu pudding. After spending almost all the 200 renminbi, Jiang Hai was ready to go back. But before he left, he saw a stall in the distance surrounded by a lot of people. Jiang Hai glanced over and was a little surprised. Because this stall was selling giant salamanders. But it was not the small ones for children to play with. It was the big ones, about 3 to 4 caddies. Many people surrounded him at this time, looking at these things, but no one was buying them. Brother, you better run away. This is a protected animal. How dare you sell it? After Jiang Hai came over, some people in the crowd said to the man selling giant salamanders. But looking at the greedy look in his eyes, it seemed that he wanted to buy them. I have nothing to do with them. They are farmed. They all have a number. They can be sold. However, after listening to his words, the other party shook his head with a smile and said indifferently. Jiang Hai had heard about the farming of giant salamanders a long time ago. Even the Imperial Court TV broadcast the farming situation, but it was the first time he saw the real thing. Farmed? That's boring. How much is your giant salamander? Hearing that it was farmed, many people lost interest in looking at it. People in Huaxia were like this. For wild and farmed animals, they were obviously biased towards wild things. In the United States, wild and farmed animals were only biased towards farmed animals because the farmed environment was better. For example, cattle had their own labels. What they ate, whether they were sick or not, could be controlled. But you didn't know if there were any parasites in the wild. This was also why there were often people in the United States who went into the mountains to hunt, but they didn't eat the prey they hunted. Instead, they directly put it there to nourish the earth. Of course, there were some exceptions, such as Jiang Hai, who liked to eat the deer or wild boar he hunted. 300 per caddy. Hearing someone asking for the price, this person also raised 3 fingers and said to the crowd. Hearing this person's words, the crowd here suddenly dispersed by 2/3. As they walked away, they were still talking. 300 yuan to eat it? Indeed, 300 yuan per caddy. One fish weighed almost 3 caddies. This was a little less than 1,000 yuan. Although the people who came to the morning market to buy things were not poor, they were definitely people who spent less money. They were a little reluctant to spend 1,000 yuan to buy this thing. However, Jiang Hai's eyes suddenly twitched. This thing seemed to be a way to make money, but this idea was quickly extinguished by him. Indeed, if this thing was raised, it would make a lot of money. But this thing was difficult to raise. Jiang Hai was so lazy. If he directly raised it in the river, what if it ate his Yangtze River knife? Then who could Jiang Hai complain to? So he just looked at it, then turned and left. He carried a lot of things and went to the hospital. When he entered the ward, he just happened to see Jing Xioga, who had just come over. She, who had changed out of her maid costume, looked very youthful and beautiful. Her original dullness seemed to have disappeared a little. In the eyes of others, she might be a cold person. But when she saw Jiang Hai, she was obviously stunned. Then she nodded to Jiang Hai seriously and smiled. After Jiang Hai nodded to her, he saw at a glance that she was still holding an insulated lunchbox in her hand. This is. Pointing to the insulated lunchbox, Jiang Hai asked her with some doubts. This is the breakfast I prepared for Madam. Madam really scared me yesterday. Fortunately, God bless her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jing Xioga also nodded and said to him. As she spoke, there was a look of horror on her face. Breakfast? What is this? Did the old lady eat this yesterday morning? Jiang Hai, who had some doubts about Jing Xioga, couldn't help but be stunned after hearing her words. Then he asked her, but he was already on guard in his heart. Madam eats porridge every morning. Yesterday morning was the same, but when she was eating porridge, she received a call from Master San. It seemed that Master Tao was detained somewhere, and the old lady suddenly fell down. Hearing Jiang Hai's question, Jing Xioga didn't feel anything wrong and said in detail. Hearing her words, there was a voice in Jiang Hai's heart telling him that this matter must be related to Jing Xioga, but he didn't know whether she knew it or not. Jiang Hai, you are back, Xioga is back too. Soon, the elevator arrived at the floor where the ward was located. Walking out of the elevator, Qi Li and the others had just come out of the ward. Seeing Jiang Hai and Jing Xioga coming together, her expression couldn't help but be a little strange. Can you show me the porridge in your hand? Seeing Qi Li and the others coming over, Jiang Hai handed the food in his hand to Qi Li and the others, then he looked at Jing Xioga and said with a serious face. Jing Xioga was a little confused at this time. She looked at Qi Li and saw that Qi Li also nodded, so she handed over the insulated lunchbox without hesitation. Chapter 1038. After receiving the insulated lunchbox, Jiang Hai immediately opened it. There was indeed porridge inside. Jiang Hai smelled it, and there was no strange smell. It was just a very ordinary red date and barley porridge. It was good for ordinary women to eat it, and Jiang Hai's extraordinary sense of smell did not smell anything different. This made Jiang Hai frown. Could it be that he guessed wrong? It was not because of the food she ate, but simply because she did not eat his meat? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai was even more puzzled. But at this time, footsteps sounded, and then Qi Jia and Qi quickly ran in from outside the hospital. They took off from New York at 5:00 in the morning. After flying to the capital, they waited for a few hours before taking the plane back to Bing City, so they had just landed. When Jiang Hai went to buy breakfast, Qi Li had already asked Du Ning to pick them up. Now the three of them were walking quickly. Seeing Qi Jia, a professional, coming, Jiang Hai immediately handed her the porridge. Qi Jia's cooking skills were quite reliable. When Qi Li sniffed the porridge, her face changed instantly, and she spat out a word, "Catch him and kill him." Hearing Qi Jia's words, Jiang Hai looked at her with some doubts, and she immediately took out her mobile phone and opened the encyclopedia. She found a plant and put it in Jiang Hai's hand, and Jiang Hai was also looking at the introduction of this plant. Catch him and kill him. Hua Xia should be called digitalis, and it is native to Central and Southern Europe. This plant is originally a medicine for heart disease, but if a healthy person takes it, or overdoses, it will cause atrial fibrillation, and with some stimulation, it is easy to induce heart disease. After letting Jiang Hai read the encyclopedia, Qi Jia began to explain. As she spoke, she looked at Jing Xiuwa. Hearing Qi Jia's words, Jing Xiuwa was shocked and took a few steps back. She leaned against the wall. No, I didn't want to harm Madam. Eldest Miss, you have to believe me. I didn't want to harm Madam. Hearing Qi Jia's words, Jing Xiuwa was completely panicked. Her legs were weak and her vision was blacked out, but she kept shouting loudly. All right, we know. You've been like our fourth sister all these years. If you wanted to harm someone, you would have done it long ago. You wouldn't have chosen to do it now. Tell us, what's going on? Or who made you do it? Hearing Jing Xiuwa's words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. Whether it was from a humanitarian point of view or from a sisterly point of view, she trusted Jing Xiuwa very much. Moreover, it was impossible for Jing Xiuwa to know about things like digitalis. So, although she did it, the person behind it was definitely not her. Yes, it was third Madam. Hearing Qi Jia's words, Jing Xiuwa barely took a breath and then whispered. The third Madam in her mouth was actually Qi Yuanlong's wife, Zhang Yu. Jiang Hai also knew a little about this person. In the past, she was a third-tier celebrity. She thought that she had climbed up the social ladder after climbing up to Qi Yuanlong. She probably didn't have a good time recently. Explain it in detail. Hearing her words, Qi Li's eyes turned cold. She hated family thieves the most. This time, these people dared to harm her mother. These guys were really looking for death. During the new year. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jing Xiuwa slowly said. She was shocked just now and hadn't completely recovered yet. Now, she was still timid when talking about it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai and the others still understood. During the new year, Qi Yuanlong's family and Qi Song's family came over. After being slapped in the face by Jiang Hai, Qi Song's family went back. In the future, they would treat it as if they didn't have relatives. They really didn't have any tricks. They couldn't bear to put down their pride. But Qi Yuanlong was different. This guy had been a troublemaker since he was a child. Not long after Jiang Hai and Qi Li left, they went to ask for help again. But this time, only Qi Yuanlong and Zhang Yu went. Originally, after they went there, they only talked about some trivial matters. Jiang Hai's mother-in-law didn't care about it. After all, he was her late husband's younger brother. She was really afraid that one day, she would die and go to hell. When she met her old man would ask her how she would answer. So, she also intended to repair their relationship. Because Zhang Yu was still young, she also went to help when Jing Xiuwa ordered the others to prepare the food at home. The first thing she did was to slander Jiang Hai and say bad things about him directly. It probably wouldn't work. After all, Jiang Hai was now the pillar of the Qi family. So, she deliberately changed the bone in the egg and said that the food sent by Jiang Hai was not good. The heavy metal in the sea fish exceeded the limit. Beef was now popular in the Western world. If it were a person with the same IQ as a normal person, they would laugh. Even if they believed it, they would go to some institutions to check it. However, Jing Xiuwa didn't know much about these things. She wanted to report it to the old lady, but Zhang Yu said that she shouldn't tell the old lady about it. It wouldn't look good. Their family was now rich, so they could just buy a new one. So, the beef and fish sent by Jiang Hai in the past 6 months were all thrown away or frozen in the refrigerator by Jing Xiua. Hearing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. He finally understood what it meant to treat kindness as malice. How much did those things cost? Qi Li was also angry, but there was no other way. Jing Xiua was like this, so she really couldn't say anything. After Zhang Yu and her husband came a few times, Zhang Yu and Jing Xiua gradually became familiar with each other. Once, the two talked about heart disease. Zhang Yu said that heart disease was basically hereditary. Since Qi Li's father died of heart disease, maybe her mother had it too. If Jiang Hai was here, he would give her a big slap. How could a husband and wife pass on heart disease to each other? But Jing Xiua believed it. She told Jing Xiua that Digitalis could treat heart disease and asked her to give some to the old lady every day. If she didn't have any disease, she could just treat it as a precaution. Besides, it was Chinese medicine, so it was fine to put it in the food. If she was sick, it would be cured. If she wasn't sick, it would strengthen her body. After hearing her words, Jing Xiua quietly went out to ask around. After confirming that Digitalis could indeed treat heart disease, she bought some back. While she stopped using the ingredients from Jiang Hai's side, she gave the old lady some Digitalis when cooking. Of course, she also ate those things, but she was young. Qi Li's mother was already in her 50s. How could she compare with a young person? In addition, when she was eating porridge yesterday morning, Qi Yuanlong called her, crying. He told her that his son had been detained by someone when he went out to play with money. He would only let him go if he asked for 10 million. Otherwise, he would kill him. This matter, coupled with the fact that she had eaten too much Digitalis, made the old lady very angry. This frightened Jing Xiua. She immediately called Qi Li. Then, the scene of Jiang Hai rushing back from Paris overnight happened. You really have good intentions but ended up doing bad things. Do you think that Jiang Hai's fishing ground and manor are the rivers in front of our house? Where did the heavy metal come from? If the heavy metal exceeded the limit, how could Jiang Hai sell it at such a high price? Foot and mouth disease? I really don't know what you're talking about. How could you believe Zhang Yu's words? Hearing Jing Xiua's words, Qi Li was really angry. But looking at the pitiful Jing Xiua, she didn't know what to say. She knew that this silly girl was being used by others. What could she say? Hearing Jing Xiua's words, Jiang Hai and the others remained silent. What Jing Xiua said was 99.9% likely to be true, but Zhang Yu was the one who instigated her. Jiang Hai and the others obviously couldn't do anything about it. First, this matter seemed to have nothing to do with her. She just moved her mouth. Second, the Digitalis was not bought by her. She just said it casually. If this matter was reported to the heavens, Jiang Hai and the others could not do anything. But this guy almost killed Qi Li, Qi Jia, and Qi Ya's mother. This matter definitely couldn't be forgotten. I really can't take this lying down. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but punch the wall in front of him. Why don't we go? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina hesitated for a moment and said. Since the law couldn't do anything, it was time for them to take action. But hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. No, there are many people watching me and Qi Group in China now. The coverage of Sky Eyes in China is much higher than in the United States. If anything goes wrong, our team in China will be finished. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said helplessly. He didn't care about the money he invested in Qi Group, but he knew how Qi Li's family felt about Qi Group. It was impossible for them to take Madame Qi and perish together with Zhang Yu. So for a while, the people in the corridor quieted down. Looking at everyone's expression, Jiang Hai was the first to shake his head and stand up. Forget it, let's not think about it first. This matter can't end like this. leave it to me. Let's go eat first. After eating, you guys figure out how to arrange the shifts here. If there's anything you need, tell me and I'll buy it. Staying here in silence was not a solution. Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family would definitely not let them go, but the problem was how to do it. This was still worth discussing. Looking at the haggard faces of Qi Li and her sisters, Jiang Hai clapped his hands. This was the time for men to stand up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone nodded. They were relieved to leave this matter to Jiang Hai. Thinking of this, Wallace Shelley, who was carrying the breakfast that Jiang Hai bought, also walked into the room with breakfast. Everyone also ate there. Halfway through, Qi Li's mother woke up. It seemed that today should be a good day. Chapter 1039. Hurry up, what are you two dawdling over there for? Standing in front of the wardrobe, Lu Yuanlong was fiddling with the tie of his suit with a smile on his face. His son and his wife were still sitting in the distance, not moving at all. Qi Yuanlong could understand that his son was not moving, but Zhang Yu, who used to be very active, was also silent at this time. What's going on? Why aren't you moving? Looking at the two, Qi Yuanlong frowned and said loudly. Tisk, why should I go see that old woman? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Jingtao said unhappily. Don't mess around with me. Haven't you been miserable enough outside? How did you come back this time? Don't you know it in your heart? If you weren't the young master of the Qi family, would you be able to come back? When those people find out that you're not the young master of the Qi family, who do you expect to pay your 10 million gambling debt? Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, Qi Yuanlong couldn't help but curse. Since being driven out of the Qi family, Qi Yuanlong's family really didn't have a good life. Although it was said that a starving camel was bigger than a horse, the problem was that the camel was already dead. The meat on its body would slowly rot, but the meat on a horse's body would slowly grow as it ate. Ever since they left the Qi family, they had nothing but some money in their hands. During the new year, they went to the Qi family to make a scene, but it was useless. Instead, they completely offended Jiang Hai. After coming back, Qi Yuanlong felt that they couldn't just sit around and eat. In fact, their family was still rich, but they could spend 1 million a day in the past. Now, they could only spend 10,000 a day. Naturally, he felt that the gap in his heart was too big. So he thought about it and prepared to save the country in a roundabout way. First, he made a connection with Qi Li's mother, and then through Qi Li's mother, he could find Qi Li and Jiang Hai. With her mother's relationship, even if he couldn't let them go back to their previous life, he could still give them some money to drink soup. After all, he was her biological uncle. That was why he always brought Zhang Yu to Qi Li's house. Zhang Yu also behaved very well. Gradually, the relationship between the two families became closer. He didn't know what had happened yesterday. After making a phone call, he was suddenly hung up. At night, he found out from his friend in the hospital that his sister-in-law was hospitalized and Jiang Hai and Qi Li were back. He rolled his eyes. To him, this was a good idea to flatter his sister-in-law. Therefore, he asked his whole family to go to the hospital to see his sister-in-law. However, his son and daughter-in-law obviously didn't think so. I was originally the young master of the Qi family. Those assets were originally mine. Jiang Hai and Qi Li, that be *tch, only stole my things. Now you want me to beg them to give me food to eat? Dad, where's your backbone? Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Qi Jingtao straightened his neck and roared loudly. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao didn't know what to say now. This was because he was really a little speechless. This was what he had taught Qi Jingtao since he was a child. Qi Jingtao said that the Qi family was passed down to males and not females. The 3 daughters of his uncle's family would all be married off in the future. This huge Qi family would be his in the future and so on. Qi Jingtao believed Qi Yuanlong's words. In addition, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother favored boys over girls. If they were still alive, it might be very troublesome for Qi Li to take over the Qi family. However, the problem now was that Qi Li was the master of the Qi family. Qi Jingtao couldn't understand the situation, and Qi Yuanlong had nothing to say about it. He really had nothing to say. What about you? What are you doing? Looking at his son who straightened his neck, Qi Yuanlong sighed and looked at Zhang Yu. Well, there might be something that I want to tell you. Seeing Qi Yuanlong looking over, Zhang Yu smiled awkwardly. What's the matter? Looking at her face, Qi Yuanlong frowned. He had a feeling that something might be wrong. It's like this. You know, when we went to the Qi family's mansion, would help that little girl, Jing Xiua, cook or something. At first, I talked about Jiang Hai and said that his beef and fish were not good, and Jing Xiua believed me. Later, I was also a person who didn't guard the door, so I said that Digitalis could cure heart diseases. My elder brother had a heart attack, so maybe my sister-in-law had it too. After I came back, I checked and found out that heart diseases are not contagious between husband and wife, and if you eat too much Digitalis, it's easy to have a heart attack. Looking at Qi Yuanlong, Zhang Yu whispered, but her voice became softer and softer as she spoke. Hearing Zhang Yu's words, Qi Yuanlong's head buzzed. He had a friend in the hospital who tipped him off, so he naturally knew what happened to his sister-in-law. She had a heart attack. Originally, he thought it was a natural disaster, but now it seemed that it might be a man-made disaster. How did you? God, what should I do now? His vision turned black, and Qi Yuanlong sat on the ground, but he was not in the mood to relax at this time. Because this stinky woman's mouth did not guard the door, this time all his previous efforts were wasted. Thinking of this, Qi Yuanlong's face suddenly turned red. After getting up from the ground, he ran in front of Zhang Yu and gave him a big slap. His plan was ruined because of this guy. His family was finished. It's useless for you to hit me. Even if you kill me, will sister-in-law's illness be cured? Covering her face, Zhang Yu did not dare to fight back. She could only look at Qi Yuanlong pitifully and shout loudly. That's right, Dad, why did you hit Auntie Zhang? I think Auntie you did a good job. At this time, Qi Jingtao also said with a smile. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong glared at him. Was this something he should say? Those people who stole my things are all dead. Dad, if Qi Li's family is all dead, who will the Qi group belong to? Looking at his father's glare, Qi Jingtao did not care. He was still sitting on the sofa and said with a smile. How dare you have such an idea? Hearing his words, Qi Yuanlong was also angry and shouted loudly. What's the big deal? Those things were originally mine. They stole my things, and now I'm just asking them to return it to me. If they don't return it, I can only use some violent means. What's more, Jiang Hai is now the head of the Qi family. Jiang Hai is a ruthless and black-hearted guy. You don't need me to remind you. Dad, if he knew that this was done by Auntie Yu, would he let it go? Indeed, Auntie Yu just moved her mouth. Even if she goes to court, she won't win. But do you think he won't use some underhanded means? Looking at Qi Yuanlong's expression, Qi Jingtao was not afraid. Instead, he sat there with a smile and said indifferently. Hearing his son's words, Qi Yuanlong's originally angry expression gradually calmed down. Obviously, he was also thinking about it. Indeed, as Qi Jingtao said, if Qi Li's family was all dead, who would the Qi group belong to? Although Qi Song was his elder brother, he was still his cousin. There was no doubt that he was the first heir. Regardless of Jiang Hai's things, thinking about the current market value of the Qi group, it was impossible to say that he was not tempted. At that time, he would have money, power, and everything. He might have a chance to succeed. What do you think? Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, Qi Yuanlong looked at him and said with a serious face. If Jiang Hai had stayed in the United States and Qi Li had stayed in the capital, maybe I wouldn't have many ways. But now that they are in Bingsheng, I can let them know what it means to be far away from the emperor. Hearing that his father was about to compromise, Qi Zhengtao also said with a smile on his face. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know this at this time. But even if he knew, he would probably just laugh. What a joke. Who were the martial artists on Jiang Hai's side now? Not to mention Jiang Hai, who had 8 times the physical fitness of the human limit, Azalina, who was one of the 12 strongest people in a European spy agency, Wallace Shelley, and Du Ning, who were all first-class masters. Not to mention that the people Qi Jingtao found were at most some ruffians. Even if he found special forces and professional killers, it was impossible for them to be opponents of these 4 people. If one came, they would kill one. If 2 came, they would kill a pair. If 10 came, they would alert the central government. Would he dare? Having said that, after learning that the mastermind behind the scenes was Zhang Yu, Jiang Hai and Qi Li also discussed it together. From today onwards, Qi Li's mother's meals would be taken care of by Qi Ya. Qi Jia and Qi Li would take turns to take care of Qi Li's mother. Every day during the day, Jiang Hai would come over to see if there was anything he could help with. At the same time, he would think of ways to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family. Between Azalina and Du Ning, one was responsible for staying in the ward, and the other was responsible for staying in Qi Li's house. If Qi Ya wanted to come over to deliver food, she would drive. As for Wallace Shelley, she had to collect all the information at home. As for Jing Xiua, although she was only used by others and did bad things out of kindness, she was not allowed to go out for the next few days. As for other punishment, it was unlikely that they would use other measures. Qi Li's mother sincerely treated her as a daughter, and Qi Li and the others also sincerely treated her as a sister. Naturally, they could not send her to prison. They could not beat her up, so they could only leave her at home. The best result now was that she did not cause trouble. At the same time, Jiang Hai immediately called Ai Xiaoxi and asked her to send a batch of beef and fish back to Bing City. These were their rations. After all the division of labor was completed, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. At least he did not need to worry about safety now. As for how to deal with Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong, to be honest, he was still confused. Chapter 1040. Puff. After wiping the water off his face, Jiang Hai let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the guys who were soaking in the pool in the distance, Jiang Hai walked over and slowly walked into the huge warm pool. After sitting in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he covered his forehead with a towel. When Jiang Hai returned to Bingsheng, it was naturally impossible for him not to play with his little friends. When he came out to play, he had to take a bath. Jiang Hai liked to take a bath, especially with some of his friends. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't come here just to take a bath. In his manor, there was a natural hot spring. There were not many bathhouses in China that could be compared to his natural hot spring, especially in Bingsheng, where there were no hot springs. Jiang Hai came to the bathhouse to take a bath, but more importantly, there was someone to give him a bath. However, that had to wait for a while. After sitting down, Jiang Hai watched the TV in front of him while feeling that the hot water was dispelling his fatigue. When are you going to leave this time? Looking at Jiang Hai, Fu Yuan turned around and asked him. I don't know. I guess it will take at least a month. After all, my mother-in-law's condition is not very good. If she wants to have surgery, a month is the minimum. With his eyes half closed, Jiang Hai estimated. In fact, with the nourishment of his spiritual energy, it didn't matter whether the heart bypass surgery was done or not. However, this was Hua Xia, and Jiang Hai didn't want to expose too many things. The heart bypass surgery could be done without, but it had to be done slowly. Moreover, Zhang Yu and Qi Yuanlong's family were waiting for him to deal with. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei, who was next to him, sighed and said, when people get older, they will have more diseases. In addition, the temperature difference here is big. When winter and spring come, it is indeed easy to cause cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases. Not long ago, his grandmother had just passed away. It was also around this time, but she had passed away peacefully. She had passed away when she was sleeping at home. Hun was over 80 years old. This could be considered a good death. After all, in ancient times, there was a saying. People should die at home and not in the hospital or other places. Otherwise, it would be considered a violent death. But now, no one cared about this. After all, when people passed away, they would be cremated. Even their bodies could not be preserved. But in Bing City, it was winter and spring, and most of the old people passed away. Have you ever thought of moving your mother-in-law to another place to live? Hearing Su Wei's words, Fu Yuan nodded and asked Jiang Hai. But after hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. There were only 2 places to take his mother-in-law away. One was Qi Li's place. There was no need to consider this. Everyone knew the quality of the air in the capital. If his mother-in-law went there, she might die even faster. Some people said that things like smog were a product of industrial progress. It was unavoidable, and those developed countries would only have heavier smog. Indeed, this was true. If you look at the newspaper 40 years ago, you will find that the newspaper in the 70s did indeed report the extremely serious problem of smog in the United States. Yes, smog also appeared during the development of the United States. But the United States was different from Huaxia. In Huaxia, the rich had the final say. When the rich felt that it was going to be over, they forced the government to improve the environment. After 40 years, everyone knew that smog was no longer in the United States. Of course, the air in some large industrial cities may not be good, such as New York and Detroit, but at least after leaving the city, the air was quite good, such as Winthrop. But Huaxia was different. As for how different it was, in order to prevent Jiang Hai from disappearing, there was no need to explain. Of course, different countries had different advantages. For example, China was much better than the United States in some aspects. During last year's presidential election in the United States, the current candidate said that the infrastructure of the United States was like that of a third world country. This was not a joke. The public transportation in the United States was almost only by car and plane. First, it was because gasoline was cheap. Second, it was because there were no tolls. But to be honest, driving was very tiring, so most people chose to take a plane. However, taking a plane required checking in, going to the airport, and waiting. Compared to a plane, trains were much more convenient. But the trains in the United States. Huaxia's high-speed rail might not be the best in the world, but it was definitely one of the top 3. It was fast, stable, and the ticket price was very affordable. If you were used to taking high-speed rail in China, it would be hard to get used to going to the United States. This was because the trains in the United States were really slow. There were also high-speed rail in the United States. The speed was faster than trains and cars, but not by much. Most importantly, the price would make you feel that it was better to buy a plane. In the United States, the ticket price for a cross-state high-speed rail was more than $150, which was more than 1,000 RMB. This was only for the cross-state high-speed rail. If you were to cross a few states, it would cost more than $200 or $300. It was very expensive. Other than high-speed rail, the basic subway in the cities was not very good in the United States. Take New York, the largest city in the United States, as an example. If you were to walk around New York City, there were no escalators at all. People had to walk up and down the subway. Of course, there were some places that had them, but most of them did not. In China, after getting off the subway, you would see a row of automatic ticket vending machines. 4 to 5 of them were the basic ones, and there were also places that sold tickets manually. But in New York, there were only 3 ticket vending machines. One of them only accepted coins, and one of them was a place that was similar to the United States. Only one of them was operating normally. So, you would often see long queues at the automatic ticket vending machines during working hours. The only advantage was that there was no need for security checks. But for some people who were afraid of death, they did not feel safe without security checks. There was another difference between the United States and Huaxia. Online payment was rare in the United States. For example, Alipay was rare in the United States, but it was not very useful. When you are eating or shopping, you can swipe your card or pay with cash. But Alipay was rarely used. The United States and Europe's capitalist countries mostly rely on cash to circulate in society. If people have money but don't spend it, how can they live? They rely on these things to make money. However, the situation within the country was a little different. The country had the final say, not the capitalists. They needed to keep more money in the bank and use it for construction instead of printing money. Everyone knew what inflation was. It was the printing of too much money. Huaxia had always been very cautious in this regard. They had been controlling all the exchange rates. Once the exchange rate between USD and RMB was low, it would be suppressed at around 6 p.m. When the exchange rate was about 5 renminbi, the exchange rate would rise to 7 renminbi again. This was very important to ensure the foreign exchange rate. That was why virtual currencies were so popular in China. Who had not used WeChat to transfer money? Who had not used Alipay to pay for meals? It seemed that the money was still your money, and it was very convenient. But the government's money in the bank could not be used. For the government, it was just a matter of left hand to right hand. Well, the topic had digressed. In short, Jiang Hai's mother-in-law could not go to Beijing. Then go to Jiang Hai's place? Ha ha ha, other than laughing awkwardly, there was no other adjective. Go there for what? See how messed up her son-in-law was? Stop joking. That was why Jiang Hai looked at Fu Yuan as if he was an idiot. Fu Yuan also felt that he had said something wrong and laughed awkwardly. After soaking for a while, the three went to take a bath. After rubbing the mud off their bodies, they added bath salts and went to the sauna to steam themselves. Jiang Hai and the others also came out after washing themselves. However, they didn't rush to go back. Instead, they went upstairs to steam themselves. At the same time, they massaged their feet. Don't get it wrong, it wasn't a sword or anything like that. It was just a normal massage. After everything was done, Jiang Hai and the others also left the bath center. Because they had just finished rubbing the skewers before taking a bath, they didn't want to meet up again. They just went back directly. Jiang Hai also went to the side of his flashy red Ferrari. He had no choice. The Qi family only had 3 cars in Bing City. A Rolls-Royce was the main car, and it was left in the main house. There was also a BMW, which was left in the hospital. If anyone had anything to do in the hospital, they could use it. The last car was Qi Li's Ferrari, so Jiang Hai had to go back and drive it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai could also drive the red Ferrari. Anyway, he did not need this car to pick up girls. After chatting for a while, the 3 of them got into their respective cars, started the engine, and went back to their homes. While driving, Jiang Hai was also thinking about how to solve the problem. But just as Jiang Hai was thinking, a person suddenly appeared from the side of the road and directly laid down 20 meters in front of Jiang Hai's car. F***CK. Looking at the person who suddenly appeared, Jiang Hai could not help but step on the brakes. This car was indeed a good car. Originally, Jiang Hai was not driving very fast. After sliding forward for 4 or 5 meters, he stopped. The person saw that Jiang Hai had stopped a little far away and was still moving towards him. Looking at the person's actions on the dashboard, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. Then, he took out his mobile phone and prepared to call the police. What else was there to say? Chapter 1041. However, just as Jiang Hai was about to make a phone call, a group of people suddenly rushed out from the grass in the distance. This group of people seemed to have more than 20 people. They were all carrying some wooden blocks, pipes, and the like in their hands. They surrounded him aggressively. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't have to think to know what these people meant. At the moment, Jiang Hai was not polite. Although he didn't know who wanted to scheme against him, he was sure that these people were targeting him. There was no need to say anything at the moment. Jiang Hai put the car in gear and was ready to go directly, but when he looked back, he found that a van behind him was rushing directly toward him. It seemed that these people were ready to kill him. There was a van blocking the road behind. There were people lying in front of him to blackmail him. There were also people surrounding him. Needless to say, the police must have arranged it. If he rushed directly and killed people, he would definitely be arrested. It seemed like these people had planned for him in great detail. But if they really want to fight, then Jiang Hai didn't care. There were no guns in China. Without guns, these rotten sweet potatoes and stinky eggs want to deal with him? Hee hee. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai turned on the camera function in his glasses, then pushed open the door and walked out. Oh, you dare to come out. I thought you had to be a coward inside. Seeing Jiang Hai walk out, the van over there also stopped, and 6 or 7 people came down from it. Among these people, there was a fat man wearing a big gold chain and a pair of sunglasses even in the dark. He looked at Jiang Hai and grinned, saying with a smile. Coward? Hee hee, if you touch my car, I have to repair it. It's very troublesome. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai chuckled, and then said to him indifferently. Hee hee, I guess you don't have a chance to repair it. Go. Let's beat him up first. Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, the fat man waved his hand. There were almost 40 underlings inside and outside, all of them rushing over while cursing. However, Jiang Hai just chuckled. He flashed in front of a person and deliberately let his hand graze him. Then Jiang Hai directly punched him. The huge impact directly smashed the man's nose into his face. At the same time, his body was like a sandbag, directly hitting the people behind him and knocking them down. But Jiang Hai didn't stop at this time. He turned to the other side and dodged an iron pipe from the man in front of him. Jiang Hai's leg swept directly on the man's stomach. This kick directly kicked the man in the air. His eyes and tongue bulged out. When he fell to the ground, he had lost his combat power. Jiang Hai had already jumped over this guy and flashed into the crowd behind him. Jiang Hai's combat power was extremely strong. In addition, he had received professional training. How could these unorthodox people be his opponents? Jiang Hai was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Many of them were knocked down. Although they all had weapons in their hands, they couldn't resist Jiang Hai's fists, feet, elbows, and knees. They really lost their combat power when they were hit. It was normal for their bones to be broken. In a flash, 1/3 of this small group of about 40 people had lost their combat power because of Jiang Hai. They either fainted directly or lay on the ground screaming while holding their stomachs, arms, and legs. It was said that the soft feared the hard feared the tyrannical, and the tyrannical feared those who didn't care about their lives. Jiang Hai wasn't someone who didn't care about his life, it was just that his strength was too high, so high that these people had no way to imagine it. Therefore, the remaining 20 or so people hesitated at this time, including those gangsters who were overwhelmed by that person at the beginning. They saw with their own eyes the miserable state of the first person who was beaten by Jiang Hai. It was estimated that he would definitely not be able to survive in the future. Therefore, these people were now afraid. They were very hesitant to move forward. What are you afraid of? He is only one person. We will tire him to death. Take out your weapons. Fatty, who was hiding at the back of the crowd, saw this situation and roared loudly. Hearing his words, these people also threw away the water pipes, wooden blocks, and the like in their hands, and then took out flashing switchblades from their pockets. Seeing that these people still dared to use sharp weapons, Jiang Hai smiled. In that case, he would leave a deep impression on them. Seeing these people rushing over with switchblades, Jiang Hai used his foot to pick up 2 water pipes. Then, he hit them like a storm. The water pipes were metal, not plastic. This kind of iron pipe could directly break a person's head if it was used by ordinary people, not to mention Jiang Hai. In an instant, those iron pipes fell on these people like raindrops. But unlike raindrops, when these iron pipes fell, they were bound to break bones, whether it was the head, the shoulders, or the chest. Jiang Hai alone suppressed more than 20 people and beat them up. These people did not expect Jiang Hai to be so violent. The 5 or 6 people who rushed up in front were instantly smashed to the ground by Jiang Hai. Looking at their sunken heads or obviously bent arms and shoulders, these people were afraid again. In a street fight like this, courage was the most important. These people were not soldiers. They had no faith. They only bullied the weak and feared the strong. It was not easy to use the knife to build up their courage, but at this time, it was all gone. Some of the people at the back who were originally timid kept retreating. But even if they retreated, Jiang Hai did not mean to let them go. He still fought all the way. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of the water pipes hitting the flesh stimulated Jiang Hai's blood and inspired the fear of these people. No one knew who was the first to scream, but that person quickly ran back, and the rest of the people followed suit. But if you ran, Jiang Hai would not let you go. Don't chase a cornered enemy. This sentence did not apply to Jiang Hai. After going up, they still fought. When Jiang Hai killed his way to the van, there were only 2 people left. One was the fat man, and the other was the van driver. The fat man was completely dumbfounded at this time. In the past, he had only heard that one person could fight against 100 people. He just smiled disdainfully and thought that it was all nonsense. How could there be such a terrifying person in this world? One person could fight against 100 people? One person could not even fight against 10 people, okay? But today, Jiang Hai taught him a lesson. Although he did not fight against 100 people today, there were more than 40 people. Now, all of them were lying on the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive, or they were holding their injured parts and screaming. This scene was like a scene from hell. The fat man and the driver were completely frightened at this time. They stood there and did not know what to do. But Jiang Hai was not going to be polite. He went up with a stick and directly smashed the fat man's right hand. The fat man also screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Say, what happened today? Another iron pipe was placed in front of the fat man's left hand, and Jiang Hai said calmly. I don't know. Covering his right hand, the fat man was still preparing to be stubborn, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai's iron pipe had already come down. With another bang, the fat man's left hand also hung down unconsciously. Ah. With both hands broken, the fat man could only scream powerlessly. Jiang Hai did not mean to ask again. He picked up the iron pipe again, and with 2 more bangs, the fat man's legs were also broken in an instant. His whole body lay powerlessly on the cold asphalt road. His screams had already made his throat hoarse. The next stick will hit your head. Whether you die or not depends on your luck. Now, I will ask you for the second time. What happened? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai stepped on his head with his foot. While grinding his head hard, he said to the fat man. I really don't know. I am Brother Zhao's subordinate. Big brother, I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Big brother, let this little brother go. Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to smash his head directly, the fat man was really scared. At the same time, there was a smell of urine on his pants, and he also spoke intermittently. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was happy. I don't King know any Brother Zhao at all. You came to find trouble with me for no reason? You want to use this reason to dismiss me? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed, and the iron pipe was directly knocked over. In an instant, it hit the fat man's head. In an instant, the fat man no longer screamed because he had fainted. Then Jiang Hai raised his foot and looked at the driver in the distance. The driver knelt down in an instant. Big brother, I am only responsible for driving. They originally asked me to hit your car. You see, I didn't hit your car. This has nothing to do with me, big brother. By the way, I may know who wants to deal with you. Looking at Jiang Hai, the driver slapped his mouth and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows also raised. I am Brother Zhao's driver. I remember this afternoon, a person surnamed Qi came to look for Brother Zhao. That person surnamed Qi owes Brother Zhao 10 million yuan. I don't know what they said, but Brother Zhao arranged this tonight. It really has nothing to do with me, big brother. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, the man also shouted loudly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also frowned. Suddenly, he thought of a person and a matter in his mind. It seemed that Du Ning, Qi Li, or Jing Xue had said that on the morning of his mother-in-law's hospitalization, Qi Yuanlong had called his mother-in-law and said that Qi Jingtao was detained by others. 10 million yuan, surnamed Qi. Jiang Hai's eyes narrowed. It seems that the person behind this has been found. Chapter 1042. Woo, 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 woo. The alarm rang. Hearing the alarm, the driver fell to the ground weakly. He knew that he had survived. Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone and called Qi Li and Azalina. He called Qi Li to protect himself with legal weapons. These people dared to directly dispatch 40 people to block him on the street, saying that they didn't have a protective umbrella. Jiang Hai himself didn't believe it. In the country, officials were the most important. No matter how rich a person was, they were just fat sheep in the eyes of the officials. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai had never considered doing business in the country. Because if he didn't do well, his own business would become someone else's. Moreover, his family would be ruined and his family would be destroyed. This old saying wasn't a joke. Without thinking, he knew that the first batch of policemen must have something to do with these people. Jiang Hai couldn't escape, because if he did, he would be in trouble. Therefore, he called Qi Li and asked her to find a lawyer to take responsibility. He called Azalina so that she and Wallace Shelley could find Brother Zhao. Although they didn't know whether the person behind this was Qi Yuanlong or Qi Jingtao, Brother Zhao definitely knew. This father and son were digging their own graves. If they gave Jiang Hai something that could be used against them, would Jiang Hai still be polite? They thought too much. After the call, the policemen came over. When they saw the scene, all of them gasped. After seeing them, Jiang Hai also threw the iron pipe on the ground and lay on the ground. The policemen cooperated and detained Jiang Hai and the driver. As for the others, they were naturally sent to the hospital. Then the policemen escorted Jiang Hai and the driver to the police station. They didn't speak along the way. When they arrived at the police station, all of Jiang Hai's belongings were found, including his ID card, passport, green card, mobile phone, keys, and so on. Then he was handcuffed in the interrogation room. However, these policemen were not good people. They didn't tie Jiang Hai to the chair. Instead, they tied him to the heating pipe next to Jiang Hai so that he couldn't stand up or squat down. This was also a very common method. However, Jiang Hai hadn't been handcuffed for 5 minutes when 2 policemen came in and handcuffed Jiang Hai to the chair. They were ready to interrogate him. Needless to say, this should be Qi Li starting to exert her power. Although Qi Li was stunned when she heard that her mother had fainted, she was still a strong woman. But don't forget, she was an out-and-out strong woman. As soon as she received Jiang Hai's call, she called the headquarters directly and directly used the Qi family's name to put pressure on the Ministry of Public Security in the capital. She even alarmed the National Security Bureau. After all, Jiang Hai was also on the list there. After the Ministry of Public Security received the news, they were really confused. What did the police mean by detaining the biggest shareholder of the Qi group? One had to know that Jiang Hai was only detained in a city. Although Bing City was a provincial capital, there was still the District Public Security Bureau, the Municipal Public Security Bureau, the Provincial Public Security Bureau, and then the Ministry. Petitioning from 4 different levels was really asking for too much. But this was the Qi group. After all, the capital was under the control of the emperor. The Qi group's power was quite solid there. No officials dared to commit crimes there. This was different from the emperor in Bing City. Moreover, Jiang Hai's identity was important enough. Therefore, after knowing this, the head of the Ministry of Public Security directly called the Provincial Public Security Bureau. The head of the Provincial Public Security Bureau directly called the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The people from the Municipal Public Security Bureau directly skipped the district level and called the police station. They scolded the police station without saying anything. At least, they had to let the people in the police station know who they were arresting. After learning about this situation, the head of the police station was also shocked. While he was cursing Brother Zhao in his heart, he was also a little afraid that this matter would implicate him. But now that the arrow was on the bow, he had no choice but to shoot. Even so, there was no need to think about putting on a show of strength or using violence. The other party's identity was there. If he lost even a strand of hair, his political career would be over. Therefore, he immediately sent people over to interrogate him. There was nothing else he could do. Name. The two policemen who came to interrogate Jiang Hai were a middle-aged man who looked a little powerful, and the other was a man who looked about 30 years old. The two of them took Jiang Hai off the heating pipe and handcuffed him to the chair. After that, they turned on the video and started the interrogation. But unfortunately, after they finished their questioning, Jiang Hai did not speak. "Boy, we are asking you. Name." The policeman in his 30s knocked on the table and said angrily, "Before my lawyer comes, I won't speak." Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai smiled, and then said very indifferently, "As the old saying goes, the word official has two mouths, both inside and outside. There is also an old saying that the entrance of the yamen is facing the south. If you have reason but no money, don't come in." Although Jiang Hai has reason and money, if these two mouths are not polite to him, black and white are not things that Jiang Hai has never heard of. In order to prevent Jiang Hai from inexplicably disappearing, there are some things that he will not say too clearly. Lawyer? You have watched too many Hong Kong movies. Where did you get a lawyer? Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the middle-aged policeman here said with a look of disdain, but as soon as his voice fell, there was a noise outside. Then the door of the interrogation room was pushed open, and a captain of the police station was bowing and accompanying a man in a suit. After the man walked in, he saw Jiang Hai, who was handcuffed there. "Hello, you must be Mr. Jiang." Seeing Jiang Hai sitting here, the man in black immediately walked over with a smile. He wanted to shake hands with Jiang Hai, but he found that Jiang Hai was handcuffed, and his face was a little ugly. "Hello, my name is Qian Jingwen. I belong to the legal department of the Qi family, and I am also your current lawyer. I would like to ask everyone, what law did my client commit and why he is handcuffed here?" Looking at the people in front of him, the lawyer named Qian Jingwen said with a serious face. Hearing his words, the policemen next to him looked at each other. It was hard to say. He is suspected of participating in a European fight, so he is detained by us. At this time, the old policeman looked at the lawyer calmly and said, "This was not wrong, Jiang Hai did get into a fight. Okay, I request to sit in on the interrogation." Hearing the other party's reason, and it seemed to be irrefutable, the lawyer here did not care. Instead, he stood directly beside Jiang Hai and said calmly. Hearing his words, the two people on the other side also looked at the captain who opened the door and came in. The captain just smiled and then left. What a joke, he and those people were not in the same group. He didn't need to be buried with those guys. They heard that Jiang Hai had already alerted the Ministry of Public Security, and the Municipal Bureau and the Provincial Bureau were now sending people over. This small police station could not suppress him. At this time, if he did not choose to protect himself, then he was crazy. Seeing that the captain did not care and left, the two people here could not help but feel a little headache, but they could only bite the bullet and ask Jiang Hai. But this time, Jiang Hai answered very straightforwardly. With the lawyer here, he was not afraid of what traps they would set for him. Jiang Hai also explained his own situation and what happened tonight. At the same time, he also provided evidence, which was the image recorded by his glasses, to prove that he was indeed normal self-defense. Although the two policemen wanted to ask him, "How did you beat 38 people to the hospital in normal self-defense?" Among them, 23 were seriously injured, 14 were slightly injured, and 1 was destined to be disabled. It was the fat leader. The only one who was unscathed was the driver, but he was also scared out of his wits. But they could not say this, because they did not care why Jiang Hai was so powerful. The two pieces of evidence, the camera in the car and Jiang Hai's glasses, could not be faked. These people did stop Jiang Hai first, then surrounded Jiang Hai and prepared to attack him. If there was no lawyer here, they might be vague about who attacked first and decide this matter as an attack. But now that there was a lawyer here, they could not say that. They could only finish the statement quickly. In the meantime, the people from the Provincial Bureau and the Municipal Bureau had arrived and took over the case. With Jiang Hai's special identity, he had such power. After there was no problem with the statement, Jiang Hai also signed. Because he was a victim, he could leave. "Mr. Jiang, how are you going to solve this incident?" As they walked out, the lawyer asked Jiang Cheng in a low voice how this matter should be solved. Of course, it was up to Jiang Hai to decide. If it was a strict investigation, it would have to be reduced to a small matter. It was all up to Jiang Hai to decide. After moving his wrist that was cuffed to some pain, Jiang Hai smiled. Reduced to a small matter? How was that possible? Sue them for kidnapping, murder, robbery, oh yes, and also for racketeering. Glancing at the lawyer, Jiang Hai said indifferently. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, the lawyer also nodded. He understood what Jiang Hai meant. It was to torture them to death. I understand. Looking at Jiang Hai, the lawyer smiled calmly. He knew that this matter was also a proof of loyalty from Jiang Hai and the Qi family. If he handled it well, then he did not need to think too much about his future. Chapter 1043. Zhao Chen, you bastard. Are you trying to kill me? King bastard, come out. In the wee hours of the morning in Bingcheng, before the sun came out, a man in casual clothes barged into a high-end clubhouse. After walking in, he began to shout loudly. This clubhouse also had some reputation in Bingcheng. Usually, it was a place where some small stars, rich second generations and the like played all night. It could be said that there was everything you wanted to play here. But even so, it was time for those who had played all night to rest. Hearing someone shouting, some people came out cursing. But when they saw that the security guards in the distance didn't dare to move, they shrank their heads back. After a while, a man in casual clothes slowly walked down the stairs. This man looked like he was 35 or 36 years old. His hair was meticulously combed, and he even had a beard. He looked a little like the boss of the Axe Gang in Zhou Xingxing's Kung Fu movie, but he was more handsome and had a good figure. At this moment, he was wearing a black shirt and trousers, walking over from afar with a smile on his face. If someone was in Bingcheng at this time, it would not be difficult to recognize that this person's name was Zhao Chen. Compared to those people in the underworld who were either called Hu Long or Jiao, this person played much more high-end games. This person used to be a retired Special Forces soldier. After returning from the military, he followed a boss. However, because he was handsome and had a good figure, he had an affair with the boss's woman. After the boss found out, he took the initiative to kill the boss. His sister-in-law controlled all of the boss's money, so the two of them directly recruited people and bought horses. After taking over the former boss's territory, with money to clear the way, and training a group of thugs according to a professional method, he gradually gained some reputation. However, after gaining some reputation, he restrained his business and opened this entertainment club. It was a place specially for the rich to pass time. Gambling, dog fighting, finding the most professional women who had lost their footing, and so on. This place was the best, so many rich second-generation officials, and celebrities liked to come here to play. After so many years, he had gradually become a very influential existence in this area. As for this Chief Lu, he was under the jurisdiction of the City Public Security Bureau. He couldn't say. Anyway, it was related to him. This time, he was in charge of arresting Jiang Hai. But now, he was probably panicking. Chief Lu, it's still early in the morning. I'm not open for business yet. Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, the man on the other side chuckled. Upon hearing his words, Chief Lu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Business? Run your F***king business? You coward, how dare you play with me? That Jiang Hai, what's going on? Chief Lu pointed at this person and yelled at him with a face full of anger. Nothing much, just an ordinary nouveau riche. Hearing this person's words, Zhao Chen, who was in front of him, also smiled. It was not his first day in this world, so he naturally knew that there were some people he could never provoke. Therefore, he usually smiled at anyone. If he did not investigate the other party's background clearly, he would not make a move. Jiang Hai's background was very easy to investigate. Since young, he had been an ordinary loser. When he was young, he was not good at his studies. His parents died early, and later, he just stayed at home. Although there were rumors that he was married to the eldest daughter of the Qi family. However, according to his understanding, that eldest miss had never taken her seriously. If she took him seriously, he should have stayed in the capital and not Bing City. Later on, he heard that 3 years ago, he went to the United States and started raising cattle. Maybe he earned some money from raising cattle? However, in his eyes, they were just ordinary nouveau riche. Nouveau riche? I'll break your legs. Nouveau riche is the biggest shareholder of the Qi family. Nouveau riche can alarm the Public Security Bureau. Nouveau riche can let the Provincial Department and the City Public Security Bureau take over the case after an hour. And investigate thoroughly? Look at the crimes of your subordinates. Robbery, murder, kidnapping. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Chief Lu instantly exploded. As he jumped, he pointed at his nose and scolded. After hearing what he said, a trace of surprise flashed across Zhao Chen's face, but he quickly covered it up. Let me tell you. The person you're looking for trouble with is called Jiang Hai. His small ranch is worth tens of billions of dollars. He does business directly with a country. He has business dealings with Europe, the Middle East, Australia, South Korea, Japan, and even Huaxia. Even the imperial court has to beg him to do things. You're telling me that he's a nouveau riche? Let me tell you, if I'm finished, you'll die too. Your whole family will die. Chief Lu looked at Zhao Chen and pointed at him as he spoke. There's no need to be so anxious. No matter how strong he is, his forces are all overseas. Even if he has them in the country, they're in the imperial capital. A strong dragon can't suppress a local snake. I have plenty of ways to settle this matter. You can rest assured and go back to be Chief Lu. If anything happens, you don't have to do anything. I'll send my head up myself. You're courting death. Seeing Zhao Chen's confident look, Chief Lu had no other choice but to believe him. After pointing at him, he turned around and left. If others saw him entering and leaving such a place, it would be troublesome. After Chief Lu left, Zhao Chen still had a smile on his face as he walked into his room. However, as soon as he entered the room, he slumped to the ground. His calmness just now was all an act. He never thought that he would actually offend such a big shot. The cause of the matter was all because of Qi Jingtao. After Qi Song and Qi Jingtao caused trouble in the first month, only Qi Jingtao's wife, Lu Si, returned to the Qi family to work. Qi Jingtao's family stayed in Bingcheng. They had nothing to do when they returned to the imperial capital, right? As for Qi Jingtao, without his wife to control him, he was even more free. All day long, he went to some high-class clubs with a group of bad friends. He often came to this entertainment club, but in the past, he was only lustful and didn't gamble. Although being lustful was harmful to the body, compared to the other two of the three poisons, it wasn't that expensive. Even if it was a high-class girl, it would only cost 30,000 to 50,000 yuan a night, including alcohol. He could afford it. Moreover, after playing once, he would definitely sober up the next day, so he wouldn't be able to play the next day. On the third day, he might be a little lightheaded and wouldn't be able to play. At most, he would only play twice a week. For Qi Yuanlong's family, spending 60,000 to 70,000 yuan a week wasn't a big deal. However, recently, Qi Jingtao might have wanted to play more excitedly and got involved in gambling. That was troublesome. This thing was big. Sometimes, he would throw in a handful of 100,000 or 80,000 yuan. However, he couldn't take out Qi Yuanlong's money. Slowly, over the past few months, he owed this entertainment club 10 million yuan. After playing the night before yesterday, he was detained here by Zhao Chen. Of course, he didn't beat or scold him. He only called Qi Yuanlong. Only then did Qi Yuanlong find out that his son was involved in gambling. He explained that he was a shareholder of the Qi family and that his son was the young master of the Qi family. He didn't have to worry about the money. Only then did he call Jiang Hai's mother-in-law, causing her illness. And yesterday, Qi Jingtao came over and directly paid off the 10 million yuan. This was the money that Qi Yuanlong had gathered for him. His family's fortune was almost gone. After paying off the 10 million yuan, Zhao Chen's attitude was much better. Moreover, he believed that Qi Jingtao was the young master of the Qi family. Then, he told Zhao Chen that 10 million yuan was nothing to the Qi family, which had a market value of tens of billions. However, he had been a little annoyed recently, so he always came here to gamble. He said that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's little husband. He didn't have any ability. For the sake of his wife, he came to their family all day long to cause trouble. He wanted to teach Jiang Hai a lesson, so he told Zhao Chen that he wanted to capture Jiang Hai or give Jiang Hai a good beating. At the very least, he wanted him to stop criticizing him. If the matter was successful, he could let Zhao Chen invest. With money, everyone could make money together. After Zhao Chen finished investigating the situation of the Qi family, he was quite tempted. No matter how successful he was now, he was only a hooligan. He couldn't be seen in public. Even the director of a police station could get him in. However, if he became a shareholder of the Qi family, it would be different. However, he was careful by nature, so he still checked Jiang Hai's situation. However, how could he find out about the situation of Jiang Hai's higher-ups and the situation abroad? At most, he could only send some underlings to look for people Jiang Hai knew. He couldn't look for those good friends. He could only look for those classmates who were far away, former colleagues, neighbors in the community, and so on. They knew nothing. His classmates only knew that Jiang Hai had bought a manor to raise cattle in the United States. The internet said every day that one could buy a farm in the United States with a few 100,000 yuan. They estimated that Jiang Hai was at the same level. At this age, which young man would be convinced by a guy who didn't rely on his father? Even if Jiang Hai told them that he made tens of billions of dollars a year, they wouldn't believe it. Moreover, Jiang Hai wouldn't tell them. As for his neighbors and colleagues, they didn't even know. It was precisely because he understood this situation that Zhao Chen dared to make a move on Jiang Hai. Who knew that it was over? He had kicked an iron plate. What he said to Chief Lu just now was just to calm him down. In reality, he was already at his wit's end. After calming down, he hurriedly stood up, then quickly went to his safe and took out all the cash and jewelry. Then, he went directly to the garage downstairs from the room's back door. He drove a very inconspicuous Chevrolet and was about to leave. However, just as his car turned out and drove less than 2 blocks, on a narrow road, 2 cars, one in front and one behind, directly stopped him. Then, 2 foreign girls came out of the car with a trace of disdain on their faces. Chapter 1044. Boss, I've brought him. Carrying a man with a weak body and a black cloth bag over his head, Azalina walked into a dilapidated factory building that was leaking air everywhere. At this time, a person was sitting in the factory. To be exact, it was a man. This man was none other than Jiang Hai. Looking at the person who was brought over in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. Hello. Walking in front of him, Jiang Hai took the bag off his head. When he saw that it was Jiang Hai, the man couldn't help but regret it. He didn't expect Jiang Hai to be so fast. Big brother, I have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. If I have offended you, please show me the way. Lowering his head, Zhao Chen was not an ordinary person. In such a situation, he did not panic too much and was still negotiating with Jiang Hai. You should be glad that this is Huaxia. This is Ice City, and there is no sea here. If you were in the United States, you would have already been fed to the sharks. But to be honest, even in Huaxia, it is not difficult for me to kill you. You are an existence in the underground world. Even if you die, no one will seek justice for you, don't you think so? Looking at Zhao Chen in front of him, Jiang Hai bent down with a smile and looked at the guy with a bruised nose and swollen face. It seemed that when he came over, he had been beaten up badly by Azalina and Wallace Shelley. Indeed, since he dared to attack Jiang Hai, it would be strange if they did not explode. Big brother, I think you also know that I was used as a tool by others in this matter. I don't know how capable you are. If you have any orders, just tell me directly. If I can do it, I will definitely do it. Do you want money, my family property, or anything else? Just say the word. Looking at Jiang Hai, Zhao Chen forced himself to raise his head and said while panting heavily. But don't worry, I don't want your money, and I don't want your land. The money is mine. That money is something you can't even dream of. Come on, let me ask you a question first. Who is the person behind this? Looking at Zhao Chen, since he was so tactful, it saved Jiang Hai a lot of trouble. The person behind me is Chief Lu of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. The person who attacked you is a guy called Qi Zhengtao. He said that he is the young master of the Qi family. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Chen immediately told him about the person behind him and the person who ordered him to attack Jiang Hai. TSK, I knew it was this guy. But you're really stupid. Do you really believe everything he says? Don't you know how to investigate it yourself? The person in charge of the Qi family is Qi Zhengtao. Hearing him say it so straightforwardly, Jiang Hai couldn't help but touch his chin. This time, the target was confirmed. It seemed that the person who was causing trouble behind the scenes was Qi Yuanlong's family. Ha, hee hee. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Zhao Chen smiled awkwardly. If it weren't for the investigation, he wouldn't have dared to make a move. It was precisely because of the investigation that Jiang Hai wasn't a strong person that he dared to make a move. In the end, who knew that he would kick an iron plate this time, and it was quite solid. Now, his little life was in the hands of the other party. I'm a narrow-minded person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Logically speaking, since you sent more than 40 people to trouble me, you're dead meat. Whether or not your family will be implicated is also up to me. However, seeing that you're so smart now, I really can't beat you to death with a stick. Tell me, what reason do you have for me to let you go? Don't talk about money, don't talk about things. I don't lack money, so I don't lack anything that can be bought with money, including your life. Hearing Zhao Chen's words, Jiang Hai squatted down and looked at him as he spoke slowly. In fact, according to his character, it was impossible to cut the grass without removing the roots, but he couldn't do it easily. This was Huaxia, not the United States. If someone really wanted to touch Jiang Hai in Huaxia, they only lacked a reason. Jiang Hai did not believe that there were no big shots in Huaxia who were interested in Jiang Hai's beef, Jiang Hai's fish, and Jiang Hai's forage formula. Why didn't they dare to touch Jiang Hai? Or send a staff member or something to come and tell Jiang Hai that he had to offer the formula in his hands for the rise of China. In the future, he would be a hero of Huaxia or something like that. Why didn't they do that? This was because Jiang Hai's main business was abroad. However, if he had any trouble in the country, these people wouldn't let him go. Although Jiang Hai helped the country to connect with Dubai, they still wouldn't let him go. In the face of benefits, it didn't matter whether you had made contributions in the past or not. This was because contributions did not offset mistakes, or contributions offset mistakes. It was just a sentence from the higher-ups. People were unequal from the moment they were born. There was no need to be unconvinced. This was the truth. I'll turn myself in. I have a video of me talking to that person. I'll turn myself in. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Zhao Qin was on his way. Compared to dying, it might be much better to turn himself in. He had money, so as long as he was not sentenced to death immediately, he had a way to survive. As long as he took on this matter, regardless of whether he was in prison for 10 or 15 years, he would be a good man again when he came out. As for Qi Jingtao, he naturally would not let him have an easy time. Okay, I'll wait for the news of you turning yourself in. You have 4 hours. After 4 hours, if I don't hear this news, you can say goodbye to this world forever. Looking at the time, it was only 6:00 in the morning. Jiang Hai pointed to the time above and said to Zhao Qin. Then, he gave Azalina a look. Azalina was not polite. Azalina directly pulled this guy to put on the hood again and brought him back to her car. After throwing him to the place where he was caught, Azalina also drove away. When Zhao Qin pulled off the cloth on his head, he looked at the familiar car in front of him. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. He thought about running away, but judging from the situation just now, if he drove out of the city now, he would probably be seen again in Songjiang if others saw him again. He was very sure that Jiang Hai was not joking because the murderous intent in Jiang Hai's eyes just now was quite condensed. This proved that this person had at least a few or even dozens of lives on his hands. He naturally would not care about one more life. Although he did not know why he wanted to use the weapon of law to deal with him and Qi Jingtao, he did not dare to resist. After getting back into the car and starting the engine, Zhao Qin returned to his clubhouse. After going upstairs, he pondered for half an hour and then started to make calls. He wanted to call the people who were related to him. Then, he started to use it. Then, he took the video of his conversation with Qi Jingtao and went to the municipal bureau to turn himself in. Originally, the people from the municipal bureau and the provincial bureau were still there interrogating. They had just found out that the person behind it was Zhao Qin and were about to deploy. When they were about to arrest him, Zhao Qin turned himself in and told everyone that the person behind it was Qi Jingtao. After learning about this matter, the people from the municipal bureau also acted very quickly. After all, there were people from above keeping an eye on it. They immediately drove to Qi Yuanlong's house. At this time, Qi Yuanlong's family still did not know what had happened. Qi Yuanlong had just sold everything he had yesterday to help his son pay off the 10 million gambling debt. The whole family was waiting for the news there. In the end, they had just woken up this morning. Before the news came, the police came and directly arrested Qi Jingtao. The charge was suspected of kidnapping and murdering Jiang Hai. When he heard the news, Qi Yuanlong was stunned. Zhang Yu was already prepared to run away. She knew that Jiang Hai's revenge was coming. Now, it was Qi Jingtao. Later, it might be her. If she did not run now, she would be dead. Thinking of this, Zhang Yu became even more flustered. After Qi Jingtao was taken away by the police, Qi Yuanlong immediately went to the hospital. He wanted to beg Jiang Hai for help. He did not think about what would happen if his son really succeeded. He only knew that his son could not go to jail. Nothing could happen to him. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not think so. Unfortunately, when he arrived at the hospital, he did not see Jiang Hai or even Qi Li's mother. This was because Jiang Hai had already taken them to his villa. Even if Qi Yuanlong went to the Qi family's mansion to look for them, he would not be able to find them. Just as he was looking all over the world for Jiang Hai, Zhang Yu took the rest of the family's money and ran away. Unfortunately, did you really think that she could run away? On the way to the airport, Zhang Yu's car brakes failed and she hit the roadside fence. It was similar to the reason why the Yin family died. However, the result was different. Because there were no cliffs or anything like that in Bingxing City, the fence pierced through the car window, got into the car, and directly penetrated her. No one knew how long she had lived, but the way she died was quite tragic. When Qi Yuanlong, who was looking for Jiang Hai's family, heard the news, he was in a bad mood. He sat on the road dispiritedly and began to cry. This was how people were. When they were looking for death, they did not think that they were looking for death. They thought that they were creating history. Only when they really looked for death did they realize that they were really looking for death, and there was nothing they could do about it. If Qi Yuanlong had not been so ambitious, if he had educated Qi Jingtao well, if he had not had any improper thoughts after his brother's death, perhaps he would still have a position on the board of directors. The most important thing for a person was not talent, but mentality. You had to know when and where to stand. Huaxia people always talked about the golden mean. In fact, the golden mean was also the essence of human life. However, in this slightly exaggerated world, everyone fought for the first place in everything. People only saw the first place drinking and eating meat, but did not see the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. 100 people died. Was it really so easy to achieve a success rate of 1 in 10,000, or even 1 in a million? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.